Okay. I've got 2 minutes after 6, so we've got to go ahead and begin this evening. My name is Dean Studer, and I'm hoping that everyone in the back can hear me. Yeah, okay, that's good. I've been asked to moderate tonight's formal public meeting. I welcome you to this meeting. Please know that this is a formal meeting. It will be conducted in a structured format with subject matter limited to the draft construction permit for Sterigenics US LLC, who will be referenced either as Sterigenics or the applicant. By way of background, on June 24th, 2019, the Illinois EPA Bureau of Air received a construction permit application from the applicant to construct certain improvements to the sterilization operations at the Willowbrook 1 facility located at 7775 Quincy Street here in Willowbrook. The application was required under existing provisions governing permitting of sources, as well as new section 9.16 of the Illinois Environmental Protection Act, known as the HALLER, that's H-A-L-L-E-R Act. The Illinois EPA received the application and a draft construction permit was made available for public review on July 15th, 2019. Currently, a public comment period concurrent with the making available of the draft permit, a public comment period opened, and that will close on August 15th of 2019. The purpose of this formal public meeting is to accept verbal comments on the draft construction permit. At the time of the final decision on the permit application, the Illinois EPA will issue a responsiveness summary, a document that will respond to all significant questions or comments raised regarding the draft construction permit, and all comments timely received during the comment period or those stated on the record at this meeting will be included in that responsiveness summary. In accordance with Section 39 of the Illinois Environmental Protection Act, final action on this application for the construction permit must be taken within 90 days of receipt or no later than September 22nd, 2019, or a permit will issue by default. Final action will be based on whether the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the applicable provisions of the Illinois Environmental Protection Act and regulations promulgated thereunder. Moreover, if the Illinois EPA determines that the legal requirements for obtaining a permit have been satisfied, the Illinois EPA is required to issue the construction permit. Again, the responsiveness summary will be made available to the public at the time final action is taken on the application for the construction permit. Please ensure that you have completed a registration card if you would like to speak this evening, or if you have not and want to speak, please proceed to the registration area to do so. Please be sure to check the appropriate box on the registration card if you desire to make comments or ask questions regarding the draft construction permit this evening. Also know that those who legibly complete a registration card or timely submit written comments in this matter will be notified of the final decision in this matter and of the availability of the documents at the time of final decision. This evening, when asking questions or making comments, the format will be as follows. You will be called to the microphone in the center aisle. You will be asked to state your name and then to spell your last name as well as your first. If there are alternate spellings for your first name, you should state whether you represent any governmental body, organization, association, or the like. You will be afforded up to 2 minutes to ask a question or make a comment on the draft construction permit. To the extent possible, and in recognition of time constraints, the agency will provide a brief response. Questions that warrant a longer response or that require involvement from agency staff other than those that are present tonight, will be addressed in the responsiveness summary. The responsiveness summary will contain final responses to all significant and relevant questions or comments raised in this meeting, including those where a preliminary response has been provided to the Illinois EPA. I will endeavor to enforce the time frame so that we can hear from as many people as possible. It is possible that not all those who have registered to speak will be able to do so. Comments or questions do not need to be stated more than once. If someone has already addressed a comment or question that you wanted to ask, please feel free to pass when I call your name to come to the microphone. At this time, please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices if you have not already done so. I will now have the Illinois EPA staff introduce themselves. The introduction will be followed by a brief presentation by Brad Frost of the Office of Community Relations on the draft construction permit. Thereafter, I will accept public comments and questions.
I'm Brad Frost. I'm the manager of the Office of Community Relations at the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency.
I am Chris Romaine. I am manager of the construction unit in the air permit section.
My name's Kevin Madison. I'm with the Bureau of Air, and I deal with source monitoring.
All right. As I had said, I'm Brad Frost. I'm the manager of the Office of Community Relations at the Illinois EPA. I have a presentation on the screen here. And it's, as Dean had stated, we're accepting comments on the draft permit. So my presentation, and I'll try to keep it brief because we want to get to as many comments as we can tonight, is over the draft permit. Now, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows, there is a new law that was passed, Senate Bill 1852, called the Matt-Haller Act, that's codified now, is law and is codified in the Environmental Protection Act under Section 9.16. And there are certain provisions in that I'm going to go through and indicate to you where we address those in the permit, such that you can make relevant comments on the draft permit. And again, we're accepting comments tonight in oral form. We're also accepting written comments until August 15th. So if you take the materials tonight, and these can be guidelines for you to help you know where to find the relevant provisions in our permit. So the first section, or one portion, and on the slides you'll see the verbatim text from the act is in italics on the various slides. So the owner or operator of an ethylene oxide source must apply for and obtain a construction permit from the agency. And so go to the next slide. So the facility, and that is to implement the various requirements in in Section 9.16. So the company submitted a construction permit application to us on June 24th of 2019. It addresses only the Willowbrook 1 facility, and it was made available. We put together a draft construction permit, and we made it available on July 15th of 2019. We're again accepting written comments on the draft construction permit until August 15th of 2019, and those should be submitted to epa.sterigenics@illinois.gov. As Dean already has mentioned, state law requires us to make a decision on the application within 90 days of receipt of the application. Otherwise, a permit would issue by default. And then final action will be based on whether the application has demonstrated compliance with the Environmental Protection Act and the regulations thereunder, including the new Section 916 of the Act. If the Illinois EPA determines that the legal requirements for obtaining a permit have been satisfied, the Illinois EPA is required to issue a construction permit. So the new law contains a variety of new requirements for this type of facility. And again, in italics is the language from the law. The first, and I've put up there kind of a simplification. The first is the capture of emissions, which is the total permanent enclosure. So we've, in the draft, as permit conditions 2-1A and 3B is where you'll find the provisions in the permit that address permanent total enclosure. That means the ethylene oxide sterilization source captures and demonstrates that it captures 100% of all ethylene oxide emissions. That same language continues on to discuss control of emissions at the source, that they have to reduce ethylene oxide emissions to the atmosphere from each exhaust point at the ethylene oxide sterilization source by at least 99.9% or 0.2 parts per million. And that the provision in the draft permit that addresses that is permit condition 2-1A. Okay, then the next section that we cover is that they have to do initial emission testing. And we include the initial emission testing provisions in the draft as permit condition 8.2. Then, so they have to do initial emission testing, then they have to do annual emission testing every year after that, once a calendar year, and the provisions in the draft permit are included in condition 8-2. The facility is also required to continuously collect emissions information at the ethylene oxide source. That is included as a continuous emission monitor, and it's included in permit condition 7.1. Then the law requires two certifications. A facility is permitted to emit ethylene oxide that has been subject to a seal order under Section 34 is prohibited from using ethylene oxide for sterilization or fumigation purposes unless, one, the facility can provide a certification to the agency by the supplier of a product to be sterilized or fumigated that ethylene oxide sterilization or fumigation is the only available method to completely sterilize or fumigate the product. So that's a supplier certification that has to be submitted to the agency before any product can be sterilized. And then two is an agency certification. It's the agency has certified that the facility's emission control system uses technology that produces the greatest reduction of ethylene oxide emissions currently available. So that agency certification you will find in the draft permit as condition 1B3C. And what that essentially is saying is if all the various conditions in the permit are satisfied, then there's a certification that it meets the most stringent, or the greatest reduction, sorry. There's also a usage limit in the law, so a limit on ethylene oxide usage at the source. That's included in the draft permit condition 5AI, or 1, I'm sorry. And then there's deviation reporting. So they have to notify the agency within 5 days after discovering any deviation from any of the requirements of this section or deviations from any applicable requirements concerning ethylene oxide that are set forth in this act, the US EPA's rules or board rules. And that's included in draft permit condition 10B. Now, all provisions and directives in the new law that are applicable to existing ethylene oxide sources are applicable to Sterigenics. However, as set forth in condition 2.1, the draft construction permit only addresses requirements of section 916, the new law, that are relevant for improvements in the control of emissions of ethylene oxide at Willowbrook. So there are more provisions in the law than you'll find in the permit itself. There are certain things that aren't applicable to control systems at the facility that are in the law that the facility still has to comply with. So Willowbrook 1 has, its sterilization operations consist of 14 sterilization chambers and 3 aeration rooms. They currently have scrubbers and a dry bed absorption device for control of emissions. And the improvements, which are listed in condition 1B of the permit, are, again, permanent total enclosure, which means the building is put under negative pressure so that there are no fugitive emissions, additional pollution control equipment, the control of emissions by 99.9% or 0.2 ppm, and these improvements will produce the greatest reduction in ethylene oxide emissions currently available. There's also in the permit a new emission limit of 85 pounds per year. And they're also going to be putting a single exhaust point with a new stack. So for compliance, to assure that these are working, there's annual emissions testing. That's included in draft permit condition 8-2, continuous emission monitoring, which is included in draft as permit condition 7-1. There's continuous operational monitoring of the permanent total enclosure, and that's included in draft permit condition 7-2. There's record keeping and reporting requirements in conditions 9 and 10, and then there are agency inspections. We've also included other provisions for clarity in the permit. 3 that I'll go through is condition 2-3A, which is that the issuance of a construction permit does not affect the seal order currently in effect. Draft condition 2-3B, the issuance of any construction permit does not relieve the permittee of responsibility to comply with all local, state, and federal regulations. And draft condition 2-3C, which is all applicable requirements of section 916, again the new law, apply regardless of whether they expressly appear in the body of the construction permit. So the improvements are a capture of all emissions, 100% capture, increased in control efficiency, 99.9 on all operations. Previously, the federal standard, the NESHAP, requires an efficiency of 99% only on the chamber and the aeration room. Went up a second. There's also a limit on future emissions of 85 pounds per year, which is a fraction of the current permit limit. And there's a new stack for all emissions that may be raised to reduce downwash. Now, what will these improvements accomplish? Well, US EPA has a reference point of risk when they talk about risk of 1 in 10,000. The dispersion modeling that we've done at the facility shows that with these improvements at the facility, risk will approach the 1 in a million mark, which is typically in risk assessment circles is essentially the de minimis level. So the main points, and this is my last slide, is the new law requires a construction permit for any modifications made to the source to comply with emission control requirements. All emissions will be captured and routed through the control devices. Emission concentrations will be reduced to levels well below US EPA's reference risk level, and emissions testing and continuous emissions monitoring will verify that emissions have been reduced. So again, we're taking comments. So the purpose of my presentation was to walk you through the various provisions in the permit. We want to hear your comments tonight. We want to receive them in writing. They're due by August 15th, and you can email comments to epa.sterigenics@illinois.gov.
Is that better? Whoa, I guess that is better. Again, comments or questions made tonight need to relate to the draft construction permit. If statements or comments should drift outside of the topic, I may interrupt the person speaking and ask that they return to the subject matter of this meeting. As moderator, I intend to treat everyone here tonight in a respectful manner. I ask the same respect of all attendees. Because a court reporter is here transcribing this meeting, and to ensure that she can hear the comments and questions, applause or outbursts are not appropriate. To the extent that such disturbances take up time, they detract from the number of people we will be able to accommodate tonight to speak. If the conduct of persons attending this meeting should become unruly or abusive, threatening or disrespectful, I am authorized to adjourn this meeting. In such a case, Illinois EPA would still accept written comments through the close of the comment period, which ends on August 15th. Please, when you come forward, project your voice into the microphone and speak slowly and distinctly. Please consider leaving a copy of any of your prepared remarks for the court reporter. Please keep the general background noise in the room to a minimum so that she can accurately transcribe all your comments. Questions regarding the draft construction permit are to be addressed to Mr. Frost, sitting here on my right. As this is an informational meeting, there will be no examination, debate, or prolonged dialogue with Mr. Frost, members of the agency panel, or others here in attendance. Also, I will not allow members of the public to address comments to other members of the public. And one final note, if for any reason persons who desire to provide verbal comments or questions during tonight's meeting are unable to do so, you may submit those comments or questions in writing. Written comments are given the same consideration as verbal comments made during this meeting and may be submitted to the Illinois EPA at any time during the comment period, again, which ends on August 15th. Written comments should be emailed to epa.sterigenics@illinois.gov. That email address is provided on the notice of formal meeting and was also on the handout for this evening's meeting. To be considered, comments need to be received, again, no later than August 15th. Are there any questions regarding the process or procedures that I will use this evening for this meeting? Okay, let the record indicate that no one raised their hand. With that, I will go ahead and proceed to calling. We have a certain number of elected officials that have asked to speak to us this evening. We'll start with Representative Durkin, and he will be followed by Representative Menchovely. I would ask when you speak that if you would spell your name for the court reporter, please.
Certainly. Can everybody hear me in this room? All right. Thank you. My name is Jim Durkin. I'm a state representative from the 82nd District. Represents Willowbrook and many of the surrounding areas that are within the Sterigenics zone. We once again come together as a community under trying circumstances. We thought the nightmare we have all been living through was finally over, but unfortunately this fight continues. In Springfield, we passed a bill, Senate Bill 1852, negotiated by the EPA, members of the legislature, the Illinois Environmental Council, and also the advice and counsel from Stop Sterigenics. We believe it's the strictest bill in the nation regarding ethylene oxide. It had bipartisan support in both chambers. It gave our regulators, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, the tools needed to keep a corporate polluter like Sterigenics closed for good. Sadly, the Illinois EPA has forgotten their core mission. Instead of working to protect us, it seems they are working quickly to allow Sterigenics to open its doors and start polluting again as quickly as possible, as evidenced by the fast tracking of a settlement on the seal order in the DuPage Circuit Court. I'd like to know when the discussions between the EPA or the Attorney General and Sterigenics started related to the settlement of lifting the seal order And I'd also like to know when the communications between the EPA and Sterigenics started regarding this new permit that has been applied for. I've been told, it's all hearsay, that it goes back many months. While the bill was being negotiated, Sterigenics and the EPA were working on a permit. I need to know more information, and I'd like to know what communications were made between both. I don't think I need to. I don't think I need to submit a freedom of information.
Again, the court reporter can't hear over the applause. I understand this is an emotional issue, but it is going to further detract. So I'm going to have to say we've got to keep applause down.
Those are two requests I made, and I hope that I'm able to get a response back from the agency regarding communications with the seal order between Sterigenics, EPA, and the AG, and also communications between Sterigenics and the EPA regarding this new construction permit. I'm glad that the Circuit Court of DuPage County last week put a halt to this, slowed it down. It was the right thing to do. No one in this room is going to rest until Sterigenics is closed. Any other outcome is unacceptable. I say this not only as an elected official, but also as a resident of Western Springs, which is located in the region of these emissions. I haven't said this before, I mentioned of it last week, but I think this is the time for me to make this statement. In 2006, I was diagnosed while I was living in Western Springs with a brain tumor. I'm not sure how I got it. It was rough. It left me partially disabled. I am totally deaf in my left ear. My balance is completely compromised, but I am lucky that I am here. I'm not the only person in this room today who has gone through a horrific health experience, but we must make sure it doesn't happen again. Now, I will go right to the point. I'm asking you, and Director Kim, Mr. Frost, to deny this construction permit submitted by Sterigenics on June 4th, 2019. The regulators at the EPA can say no. It is in your discretion, but let me be perfectly clear, and you're going to hear a lot of this from my colleagues, particularly the one coming after me. This permit is a farce. I also want to be clear that I presume that those making the decisions on whether or not this permit should be approved, and people ultimately deciding the issue, do not reside in the zip codes affected by Sterigenics. Mr. Frost, Director Kim, I insist that you strongly consider the voices you will hear tonight. Now, approving this permit and stating you had no other option is not true. You can deny and you can say no, and if Sterigenics wants to take it to the court, let them do it, but you can say no. Now, I'm going to get specifically to the permit. If you need a reason to deny the permit, I'll give you one. What's referenced on application page 20 and 21 is a section titled Compliance Information. On page 20, under number 30 of the page, it asks, is the emission unit in compliance with all applicable requirements? Sterigenics, in their application, checks the yes box. The permit, also in that section, under those pages, asks for an explanation of ongoing compliance. In section 32, it says, explanation of ongoing compliance will be demonstrated. And it states a few things, and it says something called a CMS unit to be installed in a common stack. Now, a CMS unit is a continuing emissions monitoring system. Section 34, describe any monitors or monitoring activities used to determine fees, rules, applicability, or compliance. Makes a few statements, and it says CEMS will be installed. And that's under section 34A, 34B, what parameters are being monitored. And it also makes another statement, CEMS to be installed. And then under section C, describe the location of each monitor. CEMS location in the stack to be determined. Those are on page 21. Now let's go to the first page of the June 24th, 2019 cover letter to the permit application that was drafted by the Sterigenics Director of Environmental Health and Safety. And let's jump to paragraph 3 of the first page of that letter. And this is from Sterigenics. We also point out 2 additional features of the permit application. First, the application proposes to measure EO concentrations in addition to existing methods with a new continuous emissions monitoring system, CEMS, which I previously referenced. As the EPA is aware, we have proposed use of a CEMS, even though no CEMS has demonstrated as applied to a sterilization facility like our Willowbrook plant. We look forward to working with IEPA to gain field experience with such systems in the sterilization industry. To make this effort successful, we will need to work cooperatively with the IEPA and the manufacturer, who we have no idea who the manufacturer is in this permit. We expect the permit will contain appropriate terms that reflect those efforts. Well, it doesn't. So my question is really, a CEMS, a continuing emissions monitoring system, which they propose, and by their own admissions, state that it's never been used or applied to a sterilization facility such as Willowbrook. We look forward to working with you to gain experience. Isn't that their job, to have the experience to get this done and to have that verified in their complaint? We need to work cooperatively with the EPA and the manufacturer. It seems to me that the CEMS, the monitoring system proposed, is untested and is not reliable. And at this point, it cannot accomplish the goals, and nor will it get the job done. Right there is reason number 1 to deny this permit. Let me be also very clear that this untested, unreliable CEMS permit should not be used in this area and in this application. Otherwise, the people of this region are nothing more than guinea pigs. And that's wrong. Mr. Frost and Director Kim, this should be enough for your denial. Like I said, you have the discretion. And I pointed out a very large hole and problem with that application, an untested system in which they said, we'll have to work with the EPA and the manufacturer and see how it works. After what all of these people behind me have gone through for the past year, you shouldn't act as robots. Act with common sense. It's just not right. It's not timely. You can deny that permit just based on that alone. Now, I also want to bring out another section, and this is it's Exhibit 199-1, and it's regarding the drum storage of EO. At Willowbrook 1, ethylene oxide is stored in sealed drums in an outside storage area before use. The question I have, is that area contained? Are those drums contained in an area which they have no exposure to the oxygen nor the environment? It doesn't say that in here. I think the people behind me should know that. Now, it goes through how this process works and says, to dispense ethylene oxide, the drums are moved with a drum cart from the storage area to the dispensing stations located inside the chamber room areas. Once in place, the dispensing station, the drum is connected to the dispensing system for the specific sterilization chamber. They're missing something that's extremely important. What do you do with that drum after it's completely been used? Is it brought out to a contained outside storage area? Is it sealed shut? Is the EO been completely removed from that used drum? I don't know that. Don't you think that Sterigenics has an obligation to explain how they're handling this product, not only before, during, but just as importantly, after? And they haven't done this in this report. So I use that is a reason to say that they are, again, incomplete in this application to ensure that if they plan to, if they're going to ask the state of Illinois for their blessing to open up their facility, they are gravely short. They have not met what we believe are any standards for them to even be considered for operating a business again. Now, I'm speaking personally. I'll speak as a legislator. I don't want them back here anymore. Everybody in here is going to say the same thing. They've lost their right to serve. They've given up the right to work in this region. I'm a pro-business Republican, but the fact is I don't defend this type of work. So I'm just going to finish and say, I'm going to ask you and Mr. Kim to do the right thing for this region and what's right for the state of Illinois and deny this permit. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the longer we talk and chat and applaud, the less people we're going to get to. So I want to be straight. I want to be straightforward to that.
Thank you. I'm ready to proceed. I'm State Representative Deanne Mazzocchi of the 47th District, spelled D-E-A-N-N-E-M-A-Z-Z-O-C-H-I, resident of Elmhurst, but Hinsdale and other affected communities are in my district. The Matt-Haller Act gives this agency the tools it needs to hold Sterigenics to the most heightened standards possible using the most advanced science and technology currently available. And you're not using them. As the draft permit presently stands, it does not comply with subsection G. There's some, not all, reasons why. Here's the first one. The certifications required from the manufacturers are entirely missing from the permit application. It's utterly impossible to state today that the proposed sterilization limits under the permit are acceptable or permissible without full disclosure of those certifications and the scope of product lists. Second, the permit at pages 2 to 3 seems to imply that the agency has already made findings that the technology that exists will be the greatest reduction in ethylene oxide emissions currently available. That's impossible. There's no way that the agency today has made the independent findings that the technology that exists for each particular product Sterigenics proposed to make is in fact the best that's possibly available. The statement in the permit is utterly conclusory. It's factually unsupported. It fails to meet the legal standard that we legislators demanded in subsection G. And it's particularly troubling that the Illinois EPA seems to be equating the facility standards of subsection B to the product-based standards that are in subsection G. The agency may not rest on the assumption that the facility is using the best technology as a proxy for making the independent determination that each product sterilization method is the best and most stringent technology available. The permit doesn't do it. The findings haven't been made. The permit is not compliant with subsection G. And unless and until the agency verifies that for each product Sterigenics proposes to sterilize at the site, each one of those products, ethylene oxide is the only thing that can be used to sterilize that product and not other techniques. And the agency makes independent findings that for this product, there's nothing more that could be done by Sterigenics to capture emissions for that product. Permit's premature. It's not ready. And that is going to be a lot of work by Illinois EPA. We understand it. But until that factual basis exists per product, permit's not ready. And nor may Illinois EPA keep those findings secret as part of the permit process. The findings have to be done, tested by the public before they can qualify. And it pertains to, in particular, I just want to make clear, if Sterigenics says we have a product and we think that the best technology we can use is the subsection B standards, that's one thing. But if they want to do another product and there's something more that can be done, that something more has to be done. They have to hit that next level, and it's the agency's job to make them get there. Subsection G, in short, does not allow Illinois EPA to cater to the lowest common denominator, but that's exactly what the permit's doing. You can't rubber stamp. You can't assume. You can't agree to work with them. You've got to do the work first for each and every product. Publish those findings and let the public test the accuracy of that judgment before they become final. And since we know that hasn't been done, the permit is premature and cannot issue because the proposed compliance finding in the permit at page 3, subsection C, as it stands on the record today, it's unfounded, unsupported, conclusory, and necessarily arbitrary and capricious. That alone should end the permit. Third, when it comes to the emission testing itself, I am extraordinarily concerned that the Illinois EPA seems to be relying on the same types of testing methods that Sterigenics used before. As we pointed out in our amicus brief that we filed before the court, Exhibits G and H, the Illinois EPA accepted Sterigenics reports that various samples had no detectable ethylene oxide. But when you look at the raw data, the baselines are messed up. There's clear signal for ethylene oxide in the region where this test result said ethylene oxide not detected. We pointed this out at House hearings of the House Energy and Environment Committee. Illinois EPA didn't make Sterigenics go back and figure out what that signal's due to, didn't make Sterigenics go back and say, what are these unknown compounds that are coming off the stacks? You have no clue what really Sterigenics is allowing to come off the stacks. And for a company like Sterigenics that has been promising since the 1980s to get to 99.9% efficiency, these test results and test methods are not good enough. There's more that could be done. These test results have a red flag in them. You should have followed up on them. You didn't. And unless and until you do again, this permit isn't ready to go. Fourth, Section 4B1 of the permit talks about the stack heights. You know full well that you're not even getting to the subsection B standards. They are not going to be met without an 87-foot stack height. Yet this permit application has the magic word or, 87 feet or the highest Willowbrook will allow. That is absolutely unacceptable because you know your modeling won't work and you're not going to get to those 1 in a million cancer results without the 87-foot stack height. So the fact that you're even entertaining a permit that makes that an option, it's unacceptable. And you're throwing this community under the bus when you do that, and that's not right. And finally, fifth, I just want to say, how dare you invoke 23A on the seal order? Because you know full well that seal order, the Illinois AG right now is trying to make that seal order toothless. He is agreeing to vacate it in a consent order, and that is going to, so to somehow suggest that the people in this community are going to be protected by the seal order while you're thinking about what Sterigenics is going to construct, that is flat wrong, that is a misrepresentation, and you should not be giving people that false sense of comfort that somehow, while this permit is pending, people are going to be given any protection by that seal order once that consent order gets entered. They won't be. This facility is not ready for prime time. It's caused untold harm and damage to members of this community. They have not shown a willingness that they are going to actually come into compliance. And frankly, they haven't even shown that they're ever going to be able to come into compliance with the Matt-Haller Act, particularly the subsection G standards. I strongly urge you, deny this permit. At the very least, say that it's premature because the work that needs to be done hasn't been done, and it's your job to hold them accountable for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Mayor Frank Tilla. And he will be followed by Mayor Gary Grasso.
Hello, good evening. My name is Mayor Frank Trilla, Trilla. and I'm here to speak on behalf of the Village of Willowbrook to oppose this agency's hurried decision to allow Sterigenics to continue releasing harmful levels of ethylene oxide into our air. We believe that Illinois EPA must address a number of serious concerns before permitting Sterigenics to resume emitting ethylene oxide into the air. First, Illinois EPA owes it to the people of Illinois to be transparent in decision-making. The Village of Willowbrook expended tremendous time and expense to provide the agency with the data necessary to expose and stop Sterigenics' harmful emissions of ethylene oxide. Yet when it came to ensuring an end to this pollution, the agency worked with Sterigenics under veil of secrecy to negotiate the terms. What faith do we have that the permit will protect the public? For example, Illinois EPA has not shared the air dispersion modeling that it undertook that indicates a degree and extent of pollution that the facility will cause, nor has the agency shared how certified that Sterigenics' proposed pollution controls represent the greatest reduction of ethylene oxide emissions currently available, as the statute requires. The public should have an opportunity to review this information before the Illinois EPA issues a permit and before the facility resumes operation. To that end, the Illinois EPA should create a publicly accessible database that contains all of this information as well as all data, reports, and submissions that the construction permit requires Sterigenics to provide. Secondly, the village does not believe that the draft permit adequately addresses all potential sources of ethylene oxide emissions, particularly the fugitive emissions. Why, for example, is Illinois EPA allowing Sterigenics to store both full and empty drums of ethylene oxide next to the facility rather than in a permanent total enclosure, preferably underground, where fugitive emissions of ethylene oxide could be captured? And why doesn't the permit require that Sterigenics adopt a leak detection and repair plan to promptly identify and fix any unintended releases of ethylene oxide in the facility? The draft permit is full of monitoring requirements, but requires Sterigenics to do little, if anything, once it or Illinois EPA has identified a problem. Third, the permit must, but does not, prevent the facility from operating when the pollution control equipment is not operating, when ambient air impacts are observed, or when 100% of ethylene oxide emissions are not being captured. This is unacceptable. The permit requires that Sterigenics immediately cease operation if it fails an annual test. So why doesn't it also require Sterigenics to immediately cease operations when a drop in pressure is observed in the permanent total enclosure, or when a pollution control device fails? These simple measures are critical to ensuring that the public is not harmed by exposure to unnecessary and preventable short-term exposure to ethylene oxide from faulty operation of the facility. Fourth, the permit offers Sterigenics the option to install a taller 87-foot stack within about a year after the permit is issued. As the permit indicates, the village may decide not to allow that stack. If we do not, what will be the impact on ambient air? Illinois EPA cannot issue a permit that allows Sterigenics to begin operating without first determining how tall the stack must be to protect human health and the environment. And Illinois EPA must make this information public. Fifth and finally, the village has serious concerns that the combined emissions impact from Willowbrook 1 and Willowbrook 2 facilities could generate harmful levels of EO in the air. Even though Sterigenics may not be able to immediately resume operations of Willowbrook 2, it may do so in the future. Illinois EPA should account for this possibility before it issues the construction permit. We appreciate the time to speak tonight and to share the concerns of the community. We plan to submit these written comments and explain our concerns in even more detail. In the meantime, we urge Illinois EPA to consider the issues we've raised tonight and not issue the construction permit to Sterigenics. Illinois EPA must do more to protect the people of Willowbrook and the health of our neighbors and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Grasso will be next.
Representative Durkin, Mazzocchi, Mayor Trilla, thank you for your comments and your strong support against Sterigenics. We appreciate your leadership. I will be brief so that we have the many people behind me that can speak. My name is Gary Grasso, Grasso. I am the mayor of Burr Ridge. Like Willowbrook and our other communities, Burr Ridge strongly opposes the Illinois EPA issuing any permit to Sterigenics to reopen. We expressly object to this application for a construction permit. You are the Environmental Protection Agency. Please protect us. You have proof. You have proof already that Sterigenics has admitted for years dangerous amounts of ethylene oxide into our communities. Rather than entertaining applications for the issuance of a permit to reopen, you should fine them millions of dollars and make them establish a health care fund for the many who are ill with cancer and respiratory disease in our community. And you should keep them closed. As for the permit itself, has Sterigenics complied with Section G of the Matt Haller Act? It has not. That, as Representative Mazzocchi has clearly pointed out, is a precondition to asking for a construction permit. How can you let them build a facility before they have any certifications from their suppliers? Think about it. You are placing the proverbial cart ahead of the horse. As you know, the Matt Haller Act prohibits Sterigenics from using ETO until two things occur. First, that Sterigenics suppliers, its customers, certify that EO sterilization is the only available method to completely sterilize their products. And second, that this agency certify that the proposed emission controls reflect the greatest reduction in EO available. To the extent that these certifications have been obtained, which I doubt, none certainly have been made available to the public. Where are they? How is a supplier going to certify to Sterigenics and certify to the public that their products can only be sterilized by a cancer-causing agent? I doubt that will ever happen. Hold their feet to the fire and make them come up with the supplier certifications first. And then tell Burr Ridge and Willowbrook and these communities who those suppliers are that will give that certification. No supplier will do that because of the liability that will happen when all of the people around here prove their illnesses are due to ethylene oxide from Sterigenics. I was a member of the DuPage Board of Health for 12 years. I asked them to do some quick research for me in anticipation of tonight. They came up with things from the US EPA, the US FDA, and the Illinois Medical Society. The US EPA already has a list of substitutes for ethylene oxide that can sterilize these equipments. They are things like hydrogen peroxide gas plasma systems. There is a hydrogen gas acid system. There is steam for devices resistant to heat and moisture, and there is something called a Mini-Max cleanser. None of these require the use of ETO. If they don't require the use of ETO, how can a supplier say ETO is the only way to do this? The United States Food and Drug Administration lists 36 projects, not mentioning ETO at all, as sterilants and high-level disinfectants that will sterilize medical equipment. I have 9 of fancy names I will submit in writing that go along with this. Also, the Illinois State Medical Society in April 2019 adopted Resolution A19 that seeks substitution of ethylene oxide with less toxic alternatives than are currently available, including hydrogen peroxide, steam, and other safe alternatives, what you just heard from the US EPA and from the FDA. These are alternatives. Hold the feet of Sterigenics to the law. Now, as to the 87-foot stack, please, Frank, don't approve it. I represent Burr Ridge. Contiguous to Willowbrook is Darien. You're now going to propose lifting, instead of the admissions here, lifting it up even higher so it can get to Burr Ridge sooner. We don't want this gas in our community. You must understand people live and work here. For years, these communities have been exposed to life-threatening levels of toxic carcinogens. After the seal order, EO levels plummeted. That's all you need to know. But the damage likely has been permanent for many of our residents that inhaled Sterigenics EO for decades. The seal order abated this harm from continuing. You cannot lift the seal order. And by the way, what is the Attorney General doing trying to get rid of the seal order? How is the Attorney General representing the public in that case? Please, deny this application. Do not remove the seal order. Do not allow Sterigenics to reopen. You are the Environmental Protection Agency. Please protect us.
The next person will be representing the village of Darien, and it's Brian Vena.
Hi, thank you. It's Brian Vanna, B-R-Y-O-N, Vanna, V-A-N-A. I'm the city administrator for the city of Darien, representing the city and Mayor Joe Marquez, who is out of town. My questions are going to focus on 2 topics. One is this process we have here tonight, which is, I'm not sure what the process is. I did attend a meeting a couple of weeks ago with my colleagues and team members from the other communities, as well as some members from Stop Sterigenics. We were told there was going to be a meeting, but I don't know what this is because it's called a formal public meeting. I've looked at other notices that you've put out for meetings like this, and they're titled different things. What I believe that this process should require, and I think the Illinois EPA has the flexibility to do that, and I think it's also part of what's required in Title 35, Part 203, is a real public hearing that requires Sterigenics to be here and also to be able to be cross-examined. Well, I think I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
To my knowledge, we don't have authority to require the applicant to be there. We can establish hearings under certain...
But in talking with the Illinois EPA, I don't know what this process is. We're going to have a meeting. But again, Sterigenics should be required to be here as a presenter. They should be able to be cross-examined by witnesses. If you're in any of our communities and you want to build a fence that's 8 feet instead of 6, you have a public hearing. People come, they could ask the petitioner questions. And for this issue, Sterigenics has been a ghost. I don't think they've ever addressed Willowbrook, any of the residents. So my question is, is to look at the rules for this process, scrap this meeting when it's done, reschedule a real public hearing so that people can get answers and ask questions. Thank you. My second point is regarding ambient air monitoring. We all know that the average levels of ethylene oxide after the Sterigenics facility were shut down were at least 50% lower at each of the 10 monitors. And the document showed more than 90% lower at testing locations closest to Sterigenics. And I do not see anything in the permit. I have received no information in my discussions with the Illinois EPA of how that's going to be determined. So if you were to allow Sterigenics to open and those levels increase like they increased before, what is the Illinois EPA going to do? And there is no answer to that, and that needs to be answered because that is critical. Those levels, again, were unbelievable to all of us and the US EPA, Illinois EPA. So that really needs to be determined. We can't say, oh, they're gonna capture 99.9%, so we don't have to worry about the ambient air testing. And that is, in essence, the answer I received from the EPA. And we definitely need a better answer than that. And I'm not sure if Sterigenics is still opposing the ambient air testing. In a release they had sent out or put on their website earlier on May 10th, they're not agreeing with the ambient air testing. And I think, again, if they were here in front of everybody in this meeting, they would need to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the elected officials that have been asked to speak on behalf. The next, did I miss? Oops, Luke Stifler. I apologize. I believe you're speaking on behalf of Hinsdale.
That is correct. First of all, I'd like to echo the comments of my state representatives.
Okay, can you spell your last name for the court
Sure,
reporter,
it's Luke
please?
Stifler, LukeStiflear, and I'm also here with Trustee Neil Burns, Nealebyrnes. Thank you. State Representatives Durkin and Mizaki, thank you very much. First of all, I serve as the chair of the Village of Zoning and Public Safety. Trustee Burns, who serves as the chair of the Village's Environmental and Public Services Committee. We are here on the behalf of the entire Village of Hinsdale to speak out against the issuance of the construction permit at the Sterigenics facility. Since August of 2018, the residents of towns and villages surrounding the Sterigenics facilities have revealed the Sterigenics business practices have endangered the health and safety of people in the surrounding communities. During this time period, Sterigenics continually denied that it is which is now known as a fact, that ETO emissions from its facility were at dangerous levels. Furthermore, business practices prior to 2018 illustrate a long history of unacceptable practices and neglect for public safety. Decades of Sterigenics operating history have shown Sterigenics to be simply bad actors, routinely compromising the health and safety of area residents. It is with overwhelming public support and the backing that I make the statement, Sterigenics simply cannot be trusted. For the Illinois EPA to approve a permit that would allow Sterigenics to resume operations, it is unfathomable and contrary to the mission of your organization. Now is the time for you to do your job and simply protect our communities. Simply deny the application based on the past bad acts of Sterigenics, which they have illustrated for decades. I would also like to thank you for a lot of the information you gave. It answered 4 of the specific questions. But the question that it did not answer is what type of standards must be met for Sterigenics to be an allowable operator? Are there any standards whatsoever for Sterigenics to be the operator? If we have a commercial driver who gets a DUI or a speeding ticket, we take his license away. Just because he gets a better truck, we don't allow him back on the highway. Sterigenics should have the exact same level. Needless to say, neither Trustee Burns nor I or the community that we were elected to represent to protect have any faith in Sterigenics doing the right thing. As has been established by its past business practices, Sterigenics will mislead regulators, mislead the public, continually deny any wrongdoing, and will very likely put their profits ahead of any safety of Illinois residents. It is the position of the Village of Hinsdale that the Illinois EPA deny the permit request based on the elevated public health risks that exist by allowing Sterigenics to operate a facility, even with the additional improved equipment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think I've gotten everybody now that I've asked to address. Okay, we will now move on to questions and comments from the general public. For this section of the public meeting, we'll allow 2 minutes. If you have comments or questions, I would suggest if you have a question that you want a response to, and hearing panel will have to be as brief as we can, that you ask the question first, or otherwise you may not get it answered in the time that we have. We're going to have to move to try and get as many people in as we can tonight. Again, the topic is the draft permit, and those that have spoke have done a very good job of addressing permit conditions and raising questions on those. And that is the focus of tonight's meeting. What I will do is I'm going to call a name, and I'm going to call a second name. We have an empty seat that is directly behind the podium on my right, which should be on the left of the aisle here. And the second person, if they would come up and take a seat in there, they will follow the first person, and that way we can kind of try and keep things moving. I will try and keep one person on deck at all times. If by chance when your name is called and you want to pass, or someone has already said what you wanted to say, feel free to do that. Also, if you are reading from prepared remarks, you do have the option of submitting those to us in writing. We will take those if you would like, either before or after or in lieu of making comments this evening. First person will be Alex, it looks like Gerald Frantese. Did I really mess that up? And Colleen Haller will be following him.
Good evening. My name is Alex Garrel Franson, AlexGarel-Frantzen, and I'm here tonight to underscore the comments of Mayor Trilla and Mayor Grasso. Both mayors have already rightly insisted that the agency not issue the permit. My comments will focus on issues that must be addressed should the agency decide to proceed with the permit. First, transparency. IEPA should create a publicly accessible database that contains all of the information upon which it relied in drafting the construction permit, as well as all data, reports, and submissions that the construction permit requires Sterigenics to provide. This database should include any customer certifications and the agency certification of emission controls and supporting documentation required by the Matt Haller Act. The public should have an opportunity to review the data, information, and plans the agency has received to date before IEPA issues the permit. Second, the draft permit does not adequately address all potential sources of ETO emissions, especially fugitive emissions. The permit should require Sterigenics to adopt a leak detection and repair program to promptly identify and fix any unintended releases of ETO. Third, the permit should prevent the facility from operating when the pollution control equipment is not operating, like during a malfunction, when ambient air impacts are observed, or when 100% of ETO emissions are not being captured. Fourth, the permit is devoid of any evidence demonstrating that either the stack that Sterigenics is required to install or the 87-foot stack that Sterigenics may obtain the right to install is protective of public health. If the stack is lower, will Willowbrook residents and surrounding communities be protected? Has the agency determined that this height will address building downdraft conditions? Fifth, the customer and agency certifications under the Matt Haller Act are not once-in-time requirements. Methods of sterilization and technology controls change. Will the agency require Sterigenics to submit customer certifications annually and reconsider their certification on a regular basis? Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Haller, and she'll be followed by Randall it looks like McNichols.
Hi, my name is Colleen Haller, Hallercolleen. I am a wife, and I'm the widow of Matt Haller. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Have you ever watched a loved one die from cancer? 16 months, I watched my husband slowly die from stomach cancer. He was an active man. He played hockey. He loved skiing. He loved the outdoors. He was only 45 years old when he passed. It was not gas coming from a car. It was not gas from a grill. It was not gas from a lawnmower or the food he ate. He was a very healthy man that cooked his own food. I lost my best friend, the person I was supposed to grow old with. But worse, my son, who is only 4, lost his father. How many people in this room have lost a loved one to cancer? Please raise your hand. How many of you know somebody who is fighting cancer right now? Please raise your hand. If you have respiratory issues, migraines, fertility problems, if you've had a miscarriage, please raise your hand. This is why this permit should not be granted. Nobody in this community should go through the pain and the loss that I went through. There are images I can never get out of my head, and that is watching your spouse take their last breath because of this company, Sterigenics. I am asking you, do not grant this permit. Please, for our community. There is a high school down the street. There are grade schools. There are middle schools. There are daycares. There are libraries. It is common sense. Do not grant this permit. And if Director Kim does, I hold him responsible.
Thank you. And Jana Connor will be following Mr. McNichols.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Randy McNichols. It's RandyAllMcNichols. I'm a resident of Darien. I'm also a decorated Vietnam veteran. And for 40 years, I was told how safe Agent Orange was by our federal government. I watched my brother die and many others. This is a death sentence that you're passing on to all of us, not a permit, a death sentence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNichols. And as Jan is coming forward, the next person following her will be Ursula Tanoki. I'm so sorry, Okay, as long as she knows who she is. Go ahead.
My name is Jana Konev, Janaconev. I live right on Midway Drive, about 2,000 feet from Sterigenics. I own and run Conev's Cradle Infant Care, and I am in their red zone. I thought it was going to be Sterigenics that was going to be here also, but I guess they're just too darn chicken. You've heard the expression, it takes a village. Sterigenics has taken our village. We have lived here for over 33 years. I have cancer. My husband has 3 kinds of cancer. He will be on hormone therapy for the rest of his life because it is in his skeleton. He can't be here because he can't sit nor stand for any length of time. I want you to know that ETO is heavy and it stays close to the ground. Almost a year ago, when you EPA people were here, your representative told us not to run our air conditioner. Rain makes it worse. I am now absolutely terrified of rain. I'm a 60-year-old woman who has a phobia of rain because of Sterigenics and ETO. The reality, the fear, the anxieties are real. You know, recently an alligator was captured and relocated to where it posed no harm or no threat to the residential area. Sterigenics, I want you to follow suit, and you, the EPA, has got to see to it that they do so. They're not welcome here. No ETO emissions are safe. The tools you're offering have not been tested. Do I look like a rat?
Thank you. Siri Rayo will be next. Go ahead.
Ursula Tanaway, URSZULATANOUYE. On page 11 of the application that Sterigenics submitted, I'm going to quote, Sterigenics also requests to operate this facility under this construction permit until its CAP permit is revised to address the proposal. Can this permit be used to resume operations under its provisions before a separate operating permit is issued, granted all of the stipulations that others before me have raised are met? That's a question.
So, there is the draft construction permit, which we're evaluating. The underlying CAP permit is still valid and still active, but the question that you're posing is a complex question. I think it's better that we put the response in writing because there are complexities to it. It's not a simple yes or no question. I do appreciate the question, though, and I think from the standpoint of doing you justice, that's a response that we should develop because there are complexities to it. I think as you know.
Okay, we got one person at the mic. The court reporter cannot get reports when other people are speaking. So we cannot have this type of disorder with a court reporter in the room. So the person at the mic is the one that's authorized to speak.
I have some serious concerns about the exemption for method 204, criterion 5-1, about the VOC emitting point being 4 equivalent diameters away from any national draft opening of the enclosure. If one criterion is modified, I'm concerned that the other criteria may need to be modified, such as the facial velocity, in order to adequately maintain the permanent total enclosure. The originally proposed method in 1995 does not include a provision by which exceptions to this enclosure criteria can be made. It seems that statements from the application and in the draft permit are made because it wouldn't be appropriate for this requirement if the product is considered a VOC emitting point while being loaded onto the truck for shipping. I have two concerns with this. One, it seems that this industry would like to consider the product as containing minimal and unconcerning levels of ETO in the processed product, what's being loaded onto the truck, when they talk to the FDA. But then when they turn to the EPA, that product becomes a VOC emitting point that is so significant, it must qualify them for an exemption to the method. I think what happened here is they don't want to modify the location of the doors to the aeration and storage rooms to comply with the method, or to create a second, strongly ventilated transition room to further protect against unintended releases. For comparison, the EPA granted a permit to a printing company, also using Method 204. Presumably, they have the product that's generated inside the PTA that needs to somehow be removed from that PTE to ship to their customers. Yet they don't have any exceptions to Criterion 5-1 to accommodate product being removed from the PTE through any NDO. I strongly question the motives and justifications for this exception.
Thank you. And Margie Donnell, she'll be on deck. Go ahead.
My name is Sri, S-R-I, Rao, R-A-O. I'd like all my answers in writing so as that way to not take up too much time with your answers.
Okay.
Is the CEMS, FCE, or PCE regulated? How is propylene oxide not regulated under the NESHAP for sterilization facilities, subpart O? The application on page 16 at 11C lists the last modification date for Sterigenics sterilizer chambers, vacuum pumps, and back vents as November 1990. The community was told that Sterigenics hooked up the back vents and changed them in 2018. This is an inconsistency in the application. The application also refers to the storage and transfer of ETO drums. Willowbrook Village Code is updated on June 24, 2019. Limits ETO storage to 100 pounds or whatever the facility had on hand as of July 10th. IEPA's own inspection reports indicate that no ethylene oxide was on hand at Sterigenics. As each drum weighs over 400 pounds, not even a single drum would not be, a single drum would be in violation of municipal code. It was stated by Sterigenics that the highest concentrations of ethylene oxide is in the shipping areas, yet on page 13, the draft permit states the criterion is not appropriate for the shipping doors while loading the product in the truck. This is inconsistent with Sterigenics' own statements regarding those doors. Lastly, as a community member, back in, I want to say it was April or May, we'd heard rumors about negotiations with Sterigenics and the IEPA. We made phone calls asking, and I asked you, Brad Frost, if that was happening. And you told me no. You lied. You lied to this community. You lied to me. And not only do I want John Kim's resignation, I want yours too. You've been protecting this company for 20 years, and we are sick of it.
Okay, if you're up here speaking and applause breaks out, you're going to have to stop speaking because none of what was said has probably been in the transcript. There will be no record of that over that. So if you're speaking and applause breaks out and you want what you said in the transcript, you're going to have to stop speaking and wait for the applause to settle down. Lauren Kaselberg will follow. Go ahead.
Margie Donnell, D-O-N-N-E-L-L. My first question is, where is Exhibit 220A from page 53 of the draft permit? Emission information under HAP, hazardous air pollutions, it says see Exhibit 220-A. Can you hand that over to me? You don't have it?
Do you want an answer now, or do you want it in?
Well, you drafted a permit that you...
Right, is what I'm asking is, do you want an answer now, or do you want the answer in writing? I mean, if we do both, We can do both, but it's going to count against your time. That's the.
You know,
that's
here's the
2
thing.
minutes.
They're counting us at 2 minutes, so anyone here who did not sign
ma'am,
up a sheet-
address me, please. Thank you. The rules were set up so that we would address the panel.
I'm sorry, the court reporter couldn't get what you said down. I'll address you. I am asking anybody here who did not sign a sheet to please sign your name and give up your 2 minutes to those of us who still have questions.
That's not how this works.
You don't get to just come in here and make all the rules, sir.
Ma'am, we made it clear from the start, but we will take the question.
My question is, do you have Exhibit 220-A? Do you have it here with you right now?
I would have to review the documents to find it.
I want to know under what conditions the IEPA can deny a construction permit application.
As Mr. Studer has explained, a permit application can be denied if it does not demonstrate compliance with the Environmental Protection Act or regulations adopted thereunder.
And all of you sitting up there today, do you four get to make the decision as to whether this draft permit is issued?
We have permit section staff who review the application against the law and the applicable regulations.
So the four of you sitting here today are not the people that are making that decision. Is that correct?
I will be one of the people that makes a recommendation on whether to act on the application.
Are you able to reject in part, or are you only able to accept or deny, grant or deny it?
At this point in time, we can either grant the permit or deny the permit.
And if you denied the permit and Sterigenics returned with another draft permit application, does the whole 90-day process start over again?
Yes, Sterigenics could also appeal the denial of the permit, and then the Pollution Control Board would be under their obligation to decide the matter.
If they appeal the denial, is that something you make public?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you understand that within their application, Sterigenics clearly states that the CEMS is unproven for ethylene oxide. Do you agree with me?
No.
Well,
I
then-
agree with the statement that Sterigenics made in the application. Based on the expertise of Mr. Madison, there are continuous emission monitoring methods that are available for ethylene oxide. The issue that we are working on is developing the level at which those methods can be used.
My last question is, as you sit here today, do you believe that this draft permit is complete?
I believe that certain issues have been identified that could be addressed in an issued permit.
Is that a yes or no, sir?
This is a draft permit, but there is certainly a potential for improvement. We do not intend necessarily to issue the permit as drafted. That's why we're having this public meeting, to get input from the public on the draft permit. And we've had a number of suggestions about the permit.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as Laura's coming, it looks like Thomas McGuire is on deck. Go ahead.
First of all, you should be ashamed of yourself for the way that you spoke to her. This is a community that cares. Truly, I mean that. We're here, we're giving up our night with our kids. We've done this night after night, and it's because of a problem that you guys created by allowing this company to be here, and it was shameful the way that you just spoke to Ms. Donnell. You keep speaking about dispersion modeling that was done by the IEPA to create this 85-pound limit. We asked for that modeling to be given to us when we met with you, and you've not given that to us. We're making that request again, that the dispersion modeling be made available publicly. Second of all, you are rewarding bad corporate behavior. Sterigenics, under this permit, has to comply with the fact that it needs to be the safest technology available, which they maintain they're using because they've acquired safer technologies when it's been developed. A company called Noxalizer came out with a nitrous dioxide alternative to ethylene oxide for the very specific purpose of replacing ethylene oxide in the market because it is dangerous. What happened? They got FDA approval. Sterigenics acquired that company, they acquired the technology and the rights to all feasibility studies of that technology. And now they don't get to stand up there and say, we're using the best available technology because they've created a monopoly where they own all the other technology. And you are allowing them to do that. And it is not the best available technology. And they can't just buy other companies and quash it every time it comes out so that they can stay on top and make their money while they're killing people. I also think that under the draft permit, the facility is being treated as if it's a new facility coming into a community for the first time. I think that you are ignoring the fact that they've been emitting ethylene oxide at exorbitant amounts for 35 years. If you look at the numbers of what their self-reported emissions are from the late 90s, it goes up to 36,000 pounds. When many of us sat in high schools across the street, played at parks across the street, we have been exposed to this our entire lives. So to have a facility come in today and emit 85 pounds to you guys is like some glorious achievement, which is shocking. But to us, it's an absolute life-threatening danger. After having we are the study, the 35-year study of what happens to someone and that exposure, that's us. Look around. How many of you have been here for 30 plus years? We are that. So to have them reopen today, I don't care if they're emitting 1 pound a year. That could kill us and is not acceptable. You need to treat them as the bad actors that they are and also treat this community as the victims, which under the law, you take a victim as you find them. We are all poisoned already. Don't poison us more by granting this permit. Finally, Article 11 of the Constitution of the State of Illinois, Section 2 says, each person has the right to a healthful environment. Each person may enforce this right against any party, governmental or private, through appropriate legal proceedings, subject to reasonable limitation and regulation as the General Assembly may provide by law. If you let Sterigenics reopen, you are opening yourselves up to a lawsuit. You can count on our community suing the Illinois EPA for violating our constitutional rights.
And just for the record, I want also the record to say that when she asked the question,
I note that quote did not accurately reflect the Constitution. It also indicated that to address that obligation was shared with the Illinois legislature.
okay, getting back to where I was, when the question was asked, the vast majority of people in here raised their hand, and I want that in the record because just raising hands doesn't show up in the record. Okay, and you are Thomas?
Yep, Tom McGuire, T-O-M-M-A-G-U-I-R-E.
Don't start yet. He'll be followed by Andrew Kelly. Okay, now you can go. I apologize.
No worries. First of all, I'd like to thank Stop Sterigenics and Citizens for Clean Air for all their hard work. If you notice, I'm wearing the Willowbrook Spring Clean 5K shirt. I've run this great community race every year since it started in a park right by Sterigenics. And in looking at the backs of all the shirts are the sponsors, and I've realized Sterigenics has never been a sponsor of the race. Not once has Sterigenics been a sponsor of anything in the community. If the EPA is going to refuse to listen to the community and ignore all the evidence to keep Sterigenics closed, then I have a modest proposal for the consent order. Require that Sterigenics move their corporate office from Oak Brook to Willowbrook. Require that their corporate employees live in Willowbrook. Require that Sterigenics executives to be exposed to the same risks that have been subjected to every community member in this room. Now, this may sound ridiculous, like I'm being facetious to prove a point, but I'm entirely serious. If they claim the facility will be safe, the community will no longer be in danger, then they should have no problem relocating here. They should have no problem raising their families here, no problem with their children breathing the air in Willowbrook. My point is this. Sterigenics has proven to be a bad actor with no accountability for their actions, who cannot be trusted unless they're exposed to the same risks as everyone in this community and in this room. And I'm not talking about underpaid hourly employees. When it was discovered they were poisoning the community, they did not stop production. Furthermore, they did not stop production at their plants nationwide in order to cease harming people all across this country. Now, other towns and cities are fighting the same fight being fought here. They could have taken steps to safeguard others, but they did not. They chose to continue to make money, literally from a safe distance. If you allow Sterigenics to reopen, make them move here. My proposal may sound ridiculous, but under the premise of allowing Sterigenics to reopen, it's probably the only thing that makes sense, because nothing is more absurd than allowing Sterigenics to operate. Not here, not anywhere. Sterigenics has never been a part of this community. They've only poisoned it, and there's no way to believe that they will ever look out for our well-being.
Thank you. And Andrew Kelly's up front. He'll be followed by Catherine Howard. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Andrew Kelly, Kelly. The key thing that everybody's missing here is, Mr. Frost, your numbers to say that we're safe are predicated on a 1 in a million risk assessment. Please raise your hand here if you do not know how much ethylene oxide you've breathed in over the last 35 years, and you do not know your cancer risk. Your numbers are a sham.
Let the record
And if
also...
you were here, if you were my employee, I would fire every single one of you. For you to sit up here and tell me that you know our community's cancer risk is a lie. You don't know. None of you know. And for you to sit here and say that it's a 1 in a million, none of you are risk assessors. You don't know. This permit should not be allowed to go forward until you know the risk assessment and the cancer risk of every single person here.
Thank you. Let the record also let the record reflect also that it was almost unanimous on the number of people that raised their hands when the question was asked. And Catherine is here. She'll be followed by Heather Conroy.
Catherine Howard, Howard, first name Catherine, Katherine. I know my cancer risk. I know it. I was diagnosed in 2009. I hook up to this thing 17 hours a day because of stomach cancer. So don't talk to me about 1 in a million risk. I live with it every damn day. Now, I have some questions about the permit. First of all, one of the comments I noticed was that it states here for the annual limits, they'll be using a 12-month period that begins March 2019. Why would a 12-month period beginning March 2019 when they're not even open? It seems to me you're allowing them to use that 85 pounds within a very short time if you're talking about a 12-month period beginning March 2019.
That is the first 12-month period. The second month period would start April 2019 through March 2020, assuming they were actually operating. But we have to start the time period. So there'll be a series of 12-month periods. Within each of those 12-month periods, annual emissions or the 12-month total emissions cannot exceed 85 pounds.
All right, 85 pounds contains a lot of ETO molecules. So I'm sorry, the ASTDR said there is no safe limit. So I don't understand why you're saying that there's allowed 85 pounds. It only takes one molecule to change your DNA. I would also like to address the fact that the permit indicates that the permanent total enclosure is effective as long as all windows and doors are shut. What is that? You open your window and suddenly, now is that going to be reported? Because we know if an alarm goes off, Sterigenics has a history of turning off those alarms. Are you guys going to have somebody there walking around checking the windows? Because the minute they open a window, you no longer have a PTE.
Is that a question about
Yeah,
the
it's actually a question. How are you going to keep the windows shut? How will you know if they open a window?
So within the permit, they're required to monitor the pressure differential.
Tell me what that means. Tell me what that means. Because monitoring means diddly squat if they're the ones self-reporting their monitoring. How do you even trust? I have documents that are in letterhead from Sterigenics stating how much their emissions are. But what they reported on Form R is very different from what they reported on their annual emissions report. But you guys don't pay any attention. The numbers don't line up. They never have lined up.
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question about the permitted total enclosure and the pressure
Thank you.
differential, because that's what you asked. In accordance with Method 204, one of the criteria is that you have to have a face velocity of air moving into the enclosure at 200 feet per minute. At 200 feet per minute. Is that better? Back in 1997, US EPA came up with an alternative to measure that 200 feet per minute, and that's with the differential pressure, the pressure inside and outside that enclosure. And as long as that pressure, on average, is greater than negative 0.007 inches water column, that is equivalent to 200 feet per minute. So you're asking, how do I know if they open a door? If they don't open a door. If they open a door and leave it open, the fan cannot keep up and maintain that negative pressure. The permit requires monitoring on a continual basis of that differential pressure, data logged for them to maintain. That's how we can ensure on an ongoing basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that that's being maintained. It is unreasonable to have agency staff sitting there 365 days a year to maintain that. So we rely on monitors and continuous emission monitoring to do that.
Well, I have one final comment. If you allow Sterigenics to reopen, it should be under the condition that they have returned my stomach to me.
Thank you. And Heather is at the podium.
Yes.
She'll be followed by, looks like, Ralph Scamacci. I probably really butchered that.
Heather Conroy, C-O-N-R-O-Y. I'm a Darien resident. I just have a quick question about the stack. So I'm kind of confused. You're saying that it's the height approved by the Village of Willowbrook, which I'm sure you guys have all looked at their codes. I would think that you would take that into consideration. Or 87 feet above ground. Where does the 87 feet above ground come from? What model is that in? What does that do?
The dispersion modeling that has been conducted for the facility shows that the effect of downwash or the effect of buildings on good dispersion of emissions is reduced by having a stack that is at least 87 feet high.
So you're dispersing it, you're just throwing it further away from the testing area?
No,
That's kind of what it sounds like.
we're dispersing it better everywhere.
So everybody gets some. All right.
No, excuse me.
Chris, you're going to have to wait till the applause ends in the background. Okay, go ahead.
By eliminating downwash, you reduce the concentrations that everybody is exposed to.
Oh, okay. So everybody gets exposed, not just a little amount of people. Everybody gets a little bit of it, kind of thing. Takes one molecule.
Okay. Okay.
That's it.
Background noise, the court reporter cannot hear over it. I understand frustration in this room, but Ralph, and he'll be followed by Sandy. It looks like Benyamin, I'm sorry.
My name is Ralph Scumaci, R-A-L-P-H-S-C-U-M-A-C-I. I'd like to know how many times have you revised the acceptable levels of emissions? You don't really have to answer it. I know it's quite a few times over the years since the 80s. So we don't really know if this level that's now acceptable is really acceptable and going to protect us. A lot of talk about the how the Sterigenics self-monitors. Obviously, you've heard, and I don't know if you're aware, but they don't do a good job of self-monitoring. They lie. We've heard about employees of theirs that are told to wash the residues down the drain. I know from jobs that I've had, that I've managed quite a few people, and I would be fired if one of my employees washed anything down the drain, any type of chemical. EPA would lock that building up with 1,200 employees and probably never reopen. We accepted from this company, they're not gonna tell you when they have mistakes. They're not gonna tell you when they have accidents. They're not gonna tell the community that they've had leaks or anything of that type. They're not good actors. It's just not gonna happen. You also hear about the possibility of them getting brakes cut because of grandfather rights. I've lived in the community since 1978, before they've gotten there. So there's quite a few people here that have more than grandfather rights to safe air. And plus I'm a grandfather, so I'd like to protect my grandchildren and my family. So that's all I have.
Thank you. And Kathy is at the podium. She'll be followed by Carolyn, it looks like Herlicky.
It's Sandy, not Kathy.
And Sandy, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
My name is Sandy Benyamin with a Y, spelled B-I-N-Y-A-M-I-N. I used to be a wife. I'm now a widow. And I've lived here most of my life, but my husband didn't. We have been proven with whistleblowers that Sterigenics lies and cheats. And I want to know how you can prevent this from happening again. They will change whatever they have to change to get away with what they're doing. And I hate for any other family to go through what my life has been like when I had 13 and 16-year-old children without a father. That's all.
Thank you. Carolyn Herlinky? She's not here? Okay. Then I've got Guy Franzese, or Franzese. He'll be followed by Tony Shenette.
Good evening. My name is Guy Franzese, G-U-Y-F-R-A-N-Z-E-S-E. I'm an elected official in the Village of Burridge. I'm a trustee. I'm also chairperson of the Village of Burridge Environmental Quality Commission. I've been a Village of Burridge resident for 40 years, and I live 1.7 miles downwind of Sterigenics, and I've lived there for 30 years as a guinea pig. Questions on the application. In the Sterigenics permit application, Exhibit 199-1, page 9, it is stated that outdoor ethylene oxide drum storage will comply with NFPA 55, paragraph 14. For those of you who aren't familiar with NFPA 55, chapter 14, it provides industry standards, codes and standards in the storage, handling, and use of ethylene oxide in sterilization and fumigation applications. Specifically, one element of NFP 55, paragraph 14, provides guidance for the outside storage of ethylene oxide. In my opinion, as a licensed professional engineer in the state of Illinois, those guidelines are weak. How will the Illinois EPA ensure ethylene oxide storage of this facility is accomplished employing the best and safest practices possible? Mr. Brian Munch, Engineering Director of Sterigenics, is listed as a member of the technical committee overseeing NFPA 55, paragraph 14. Did he author that paragraph? I'd like an answer to that. You can respond to me later. Again, NFPA 55, chapter 14 provides codes and standards for storage, handling, and uses of ethylene oxide in sterilization and fumigation operations. In the event of a leaking drum of ethylene oxide that has stored outside of the PTE, explain the methods by which leaks will be detected, and also the methods which the leak will be contained on site and not be emitted to the environment. In the event of a leaking drum of ethylene oxide that is inside of the PTE, explain the method or methods by which the leak will be contained inside the PTE and will not be emitted to the environment. Is the scrubber, these are additional questions, is the scrubber system that is being proposed to be modified have the capacity to contain and treat a catastrophic drum failure that could occur inside the PTE? If it does have the capacity, if it does not have the capacity, why aren't the residents protected? Was a process hazards analysis performed for this scenario of a catastrophic drum failure? If so, what are the recommendations of that process hazards analysis? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to ask if you'd consider doing that. Tony will be followed by Yvonne. It looks like, is it Merrigan? I can't read the last name.
Mayor.
Okay.
My name is Tony Schiappa, Tony Schiappa. I have two comments and a question. I am also a trustee with the Village of Burr Ridge. I represent the residents of the Village of Burr Ridge. This application includes outside storage of ETO drums. There was a unanimous consent from the commission agreed that they find any outside storage of ETO unacceptable. This should be noted in the form of a statement. No outside storage of ETO. And the amount of ETO that would be allowed to be admitted per month per year was discussed. The commission agreed that the permit should be clear that it is intended that no more than 8.5 pounds may be permitted per month and that the total for a year should not exceed 85 pounds. And then my question is more for the audience. Do we want Sterigenics to open again? No. We've got hundreds of people here that don't want it open. Do your job. Keep them closed. We're scared and we're mad. We want them closed. It's not safe for us. It's my understanding ETO is banned in the European Union. Why can't we be like them? There are other ways to sterilize this equipment. We have self-driving cars. Let's figure it out. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Yvonne will be followed by, is it Jennifer Howe? Okay.
Yvonne Mayer, Y-V-O-N-N-E, Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R. I've lived in Burr Ridge, less than 2 miles from Sterigenics, since 2001. Moved to this community right before 9/11. Never thought I would see another devastation like 9/11. This is our 9/11. You're killing us. I want to follow up with a couple of questions that have already been asked, which I don't think you guys answered. That exhibit that you asked for, 220A, I think it was, if you could let us know before tonight's over whether you have it, whether it's part of the application. So you can have one of your minions start looking, or maybe look yourself, but you could please find that. Then Ms. Howard stepped up here, and she asked a question about that March 2019 date as the beginning of the 12-month monitoring period. And you basically said, oh, it's just March to next April. But I think you missed the point. The point was, if you're measuring 85 pounds, and say Sterigenics reopens next January, they're going to just pump it out really fast and furious at a rate much higher than if they had a full 12 months. So you really shouldn't be giving them more than 12 months from the day they open. That's when the monitoring period should start.
And the permit would require that, beginning the day the monitoring period would require, assuming they would reopen, for that month and the next 11 months, the 12 months total, the emissions would have to be no more than 85 pounds.
But why are you putting why don't you put that into the permit then? Say that, instead of starting with March 2019. It doesn't make sense to have March 2019. It gives them another loophole, and we're trying to close all available loopholes. They will come back to you. They will say, we pumped it out faster than if you'd spread that 85 pounds over a 12-month window, and you allowed us to do it because you put the March 2019 date in there, a date that you should modify. If you really care and you really want it to be 85 over 12 months, just make that change. Doesn't make sense not to.
We will consider the recommendation, the suggestion. However, the flaw that you have identified does not exist.
Then it'll be easy for you to fix it by making it very clear that it doesn't exist. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer will be followed by another Jennifer, it looks like McDowell.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Houck. My last name is spelled Houch. I'm a mother, and I live 1.8 miles from Sterigenics. I sent my 2-year-old to preschool within a mile of Sterigenics. Mr. Frost, many months ago, I had several conversations with you, and you assured me of my family's safety. Now, Illinois IDPH has confirmed increased cancer cases in our area. Do you still stand by your earlier statements?
I don't believe in any conversation I've had with any resident that I've ever used the term safe. That's not a term that we use. We talk about risk.
Okay. All right. Okay, here's my questions. According to the Matt Haller Act, this facility must use the best available technology to reduce emissions. What research has been done to ensure what Sterigenics is using is indeed the safest that's out there?
The agency has conducted a review and analysis of the technology that's being used and applicable limits in other jurisdictions. The facility would have incredible control trains to control emissions. In particular, for the sterilization evacuations, they would have a scrubber, followed by a scrubber, followed by a dry bed absorber, followed by a dry bed absorber. So for the principal source of emissions from the facility, they had a control train with 4 devices in series.
And so you know that that's the safest that's available in the nation? That's validated?
Based on our research, that is the case.
Okay. My next question is, where is the data for the dispersion modeling that you referred to?
I think that that's something that we'll have to respond to in the responsiveness summary. I mean, we don't have it here tonight.
So, and then who did the dispersion modeling?
Yeah, Sterigenics, and then we reviewed it.
The initial dispersion modeling was conducted by Sterigenics. The Illinois EPA conducted independent audit modeling to confirm that dispersion modeling.
Okay, Jennifer will be followed by Tom. It looks like Hayden, is it?
Good evening, Jennifer McConaughey, MC, CONAHY, resident of Burr Ridge. I'm here on behalf of Stop Sterigenics, as well as the Burr Ridge Environmental Quality Commission Committee. You're probably well aware that we've had a lot of interaction with the federal EPA. I'm wondering what thought has been given to delaying consideration of the permit in light of the fact that the rulemaking process for national ETO standards has not yet begun, nor have we received our full risk assessment by the federal EPA.
So as has been mentioned several times tonight, we statutorily, under the law, have 90 days to review applications.
That didn't really answer my question, I don't think.
I think you asked for us to delay our decision on a permit. We have 90 days. Under the Illinois Environmental Protection Act, we have 90 days to make a decision on an application.
So my question is, we don't have our full risk assessment, nor has the rulemaking process started on ethylene oxide. That's not taken into consideration.
That's outside the scope of the permitting.
My other question has to do with the sterilization process. It's been brought to our attention that another chemical, ethylene chlorohydrin, is another gas that sometimes gets made during the sterilization process. It's deemed extremely hazardous. Are these emissions being controlled? Are they being monitored? Or are we all just being exposed to another toxic chemical?
The pollution control equipment would work on any VOCs coming out of the facility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And as Tom is coming to the mic, he'll be followed by, it looks like, Joan Anton.
My name is Tom Layden, T-O-M-L-A-Y-D-E-N. I am a member of the Environmental Quality Committee of Burr Ridge. I'm a retired physician, former professor of medicine, and chair of the Department of Medicine at the University of Illinois. I find all of this conversation very difficult.
Can you speak into the mic a little bit better so that they can hear you in back and so the court reporter can hear you too? Yeah, that's fine too.
Also, can I hear you? You hear me? Yeah. I find this conversation very difficult, and I find it very painful to hear from the citizens of Burr Ridge who have been affected by ethylene oxide. The reality is ethylene oxide is a group 1 carcinogen. It's in the same category as tobacco and asbestos. We are only beginning to learn a lot more about it. We know that everywhere that ethylene oxide is used, the cancer risk is enhanced. Secondly, I want to say that to support the Chicago Medical Society and Illinois State Medical Society, which made it very clear that there are other forms of sterilization that are available.
You're beginning to drift again.
Huh?
Yeah, you're beginning to drift away.
Yeah. There are other forms of sterilization that could be used safely, like hydrogen peroxide, and accomplish the exact same thing. Third, for me, is ethically challenging to discuss means to continue to spew ethylene oxide near schools and homes, maybe in a little bit lower level. It would be like me saying to a patient, it's okay to smoke one cigarette, but just don't smoke a pack of cigarettes. The same thing. We don't know exactly what the long-term effects of ethylene oxide will be, even at lower levels. So I ask you, with regards to your model, whether it's going to be a 5-foot stack, an 85-foot stack, do you really know what the cancer risk really will be? that they'll be reduced by going to 85 pounds. Do you really know that? I mean, we know it's a carcinogen. Yeah.
So again, what we use is the ATSDR's IRIS value, their Craig value, which is their 1 in a million based on the IRIS value. But we are not the risk. The ATSDR does their risk assessment, and our permitting. The permitting is based on the new law and then the current laws and applicable regulations. So those don't address risk, but the risk analysis that's done is for, us looking at that is more from an informational, but we're using US EPA's IRIS value.
But those are laws, they're not science.
US EPA are scientists, yes.
No, I understand they're scientists, but do you know the science of lower levels?
We use the US EPA's IRIS value. That's the standard that's out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just for the record, they used the term IRIS. It's capital I, capital R, capital I, capital S.
I hope I got the name right. My name is Joe Giacalone, Giacalone Jr. I'm just up here for a quick comment. Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. I only have a junior college degree. I'm not well educated like I'm sure most of you are. But Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, isn't that an agency to protect the environment of the Illinois citizens? Well, help us. I just turned 65 last year. I'm looking for my golden years to enjoy life in retirement. Right now I'm battling not one, but 2 forms of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. When I found out about Sterigenics, I was on this bandwagon before I even had it. Then I was diagnosed in January with 1. I fought that battle with 4 weeks of immunotherapy. I go for my PET scan. They found another one, a second non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I like my new hairdo, by the way. But Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, please do your job and protect our residents. I'm a Darien, lifelong, 28-year resident of Darien. I'm a self-employed. I belong to the Willowbrook Burridge Chamber of Commerce, Darien Chamber of Commerce. I work out of my house. I have an office. I'm there 24/7. Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, please protect us. Do not allow this permit. And if you do allow this permit, my good friend, Mayor Frank Trilla, I make a proposal that we open up a new Environmental Protection Agency office right next to Sterigenics and give you guys a window seat office, free of charge, no rent. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like I messed up again because I didn't call Judy Cribbs, who's the next speaker, to be on deck. And she'll be followed by Carolyn Nash. Judy Cribbs? Oh, she's coming. And she'll be followed by Carolyn Nash.
My name is Judith Cribbs McCoyak, Kribbs, McCoyak, MacKowiak. I am a resident of Burr Ridge, and I really have a question. If this stuff was not supposed to happen, why? I live on a 4-house block. 3 women have cancer, 2 died. Am I the next? Are you going to open up Sterigenics so I can be the next? I can't breathe. I had part of my lung removed. What else are you going to take? My other part of my lungs? You can't open up Sterigenics for any reason. If you do, you're putting a death notice on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cripps. And Carolyn Nash is coming forth, and she'll be followed by Catherine Collins.
My name is Caroline Nash, CAROLINENASH. I have a few statements and questions. You don't have to answer my questions now. So I just want to quote Phil McNabb, the president of Sterigenics, that you've been working with, stated this week, that they are not reporting emissions in Georgia because of problematic lawsuits. So they will do the bare minimum as evidenced by what's happened to this community, or worse. And I would like you to take that into consideration. When I went to the EPA presentation this spring, and we didn't receive the appropriate modeling data prior to review, it was very concerning. They talked about a system that would protect us. And in that model that they showed an increased stack height. I'd like to know how you can have a permit application that has an either-or stack height by I think the village of Willowbrook is somewhere about 40 feet. That's half. It's very concerning. I couldn't do that if I was going to, put something on my home. Number 3, Sterigenics asked years ago to remove the back vents because of an explosion risk, and that was stated in documents by Kathleen Hoffman. I would like to know the pressure differential system that you are proposing. Doesn't seem like a big enough pressure difference to protect the community, and if you put in a better differential or a higher pressure difference, I'm not a scientist, then we would have a risk of explosion. And go back to what Kathleen Hoffman stated. They removed those back vents because of the risk of explosion. So obviously it was a different pressure differential than they're looking at now, or it puts it at risk either way, by ethylene oxide or by an explosion risk. I'd like to know how you know this system will work. I sat in this room last August, and I was reassured that the controls were going to work. Evidenced by the ambient air results that we received, we were reassured those controls would work. I thought we would be breathing clean air by now. Your system failed, their system failed. This is not okay. I'm asking you not to approve this permit, not because I'm emotional and upset about this, as the rest of the community, because it is not safe. It has not been proven safe. This is a company that cannot be trusted. My first statement, they're not even reporting their emissions because of problematic lawsuits. That is not a company that you should be working with behind the scenes and not protecting this community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Catherine Collins is coming to the mic. She'll be followed by Andrea Collins.
Hello, my name is Catherine Collins. That's CATHERINECOLLINS, and I'm going to be a rising senior at Hinsdale Central High School, which is just down the road. So I know in your earlier presentation you said that Sterigenics wasn't going to emit a certain amount of ethylene oxide, but Sterigenics is the company that's logging and regulating that amount. And so I'd like an answer for this. How will you ensure that Sterigenics, which is a company that hasn't been truthful in the past, will truthfully log their emissions?
So as part of the permit, we have a continuous emission monitoring system which data logs into a system. that we have access to. So it's not something that they can change or modify.
But-
And that's how we're going to document out of these stack emissions.
But this doesn't only apply to the emissions as well. What you're talking about before with the pressure, Sterigenics is the person that is the organization that is reporting that to you, correct?
Well, the data is collected through the monitoring system that they install, and then we have the ability, and we'll be looking at that as well.
And they'll be reporting that data to you, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Andrea Collins? Okay. Alexandra? Is it Collins?
It's hard to be shocked at this point by anything that you guys say, but I am really struggling with the fact that you let Sterigenics do that dispersion modeling. And completely, multiple times, have been absolute liars about it. When we sat in a meeting,
Can you state your name again just so they have
Sure.
it for the record?
Lauren Kaesberg, Kaeseberg. We sat in a meeting with officials from the Illinois EPA and the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office. Willowbrook, Darien, Stop Sterigenics members were there when we were told that this consent order was going to be agreed to. And this 85-pound limit was brought to our attention for the first time. And I'm not crazy, there are other people in this room who were there for this conversation, and I need you to have my back on this if I'm correct, was 85 pounds. That's like a new number. Is that an arbitrary number that you came up with? Why 85 pounds? And Illinois EPA officials specifically said, we did air modeling, we did dispersion modeling, and that's the number we used that finally got us to the 1 in a million cancer risk. And I said, oh, you did dispersion modeling? I thought you guys didn't do dispersion modeling. Can we see a copy of what you guys did? Yes. Then members of Stop Sterigenics have since then asked for that dispersion modeling data and whatever reports there are, and we've not been given them. For you to sit here tonight and say that Sterigenics did that dispersion modeling, I don't care if you audited it, like, what is wrong with you? Honestly, like, what amount of trust? Like, it's actually, like, completely insane to me, and I sound like a moron right now because I'm just processing this, but to be lied to face is so offensive after the time that we've all given to this, the money that these communities have spent. It's outrageous. You guys are a complete mockery of what government should be, and I am disgusted. And you're telling us that 85 pounds is the safe amount that gets us to a 1 in a million cancer risk, which none of us accept that that's okay, but let's just say that that's what's there. So Sterigenics not only has their hand in the legislation by telling IEPA what to veto and not allow to be in the legislation, but now Sterigenics is actually telling you what the safe level is for our community? Like, quit. Get people who actually care to do your jobs, because you guys aren't doing them. If you don't care enough to sit there and have like the decency, then why do you have these jobs? Go work for like a Starbucks or a gas station. Like, go do something where people don't rely on you to actually protect them. I'm so insulted and upset. Like, I have to stop. My time is up. But I don't know.
Okay. I just want to address that. We have modelers at the Illinois EPA. It's standard practice just as it's standard practice for companies when they submit their applications to submit certain information to us, and then our staff review and verify that. Is that an accurate statement?
Why do you lie about it? Yeah, why lie? That is a correct statement. I also want to refer people back to the Matt Haller Act. The Matt Haller Act specifically states that it is the duty of the source to perform the dispersion modeling, and it is the duty of the agency to review and determine whether that modeling is acceptable.
Then
I
Okay.
cannot speak to a meeting at which I was not present. Were any of us present at that meeting? Who?
We've progressed from being an orderly chaos to being more chaotic than order.
The gentleman on the left, he was there. He was present.
Let me also clarify something that was said tonight, which we have not said, but it's being attributed to us, which is that this is at a 1 in a million risk. We've said it's close to a 1 in a million risk. We have not said that it's at.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Close to. We're talking about our lives.
We have 31 people to speak yet
Seriously,
this evening,
though.
ma'am.
Does anybody care if I take 10 seconds? I have one question. How do you sleep at night? How? Because I grew up here and all of my classmates have been exposed. My family has been exposed. My parents are struggling through cancer. My whole neighborhood, Burr Ridge, Darien, Hinsdale, Clarendon Hills, Willowbrook, it goes on and on. Where is the safe zone? 20 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles? Because I tell you what, there's Lake County, there's McCook, there are places all over here that are throwing ethylene oxide into our air. Illinois Protection Agency, how do you sleep at night? Sleep in my bed, come to my house, sleep there and breathe the toxin. How do you sleep at night? Answer me. How do you sleep at night? How far do you live? Where's the safe zone? I want to know because I have a 4-year-old and a husband and I'm trying to get pregnant and I can't. So tell me where I can live that's safe. And answer my question. How do you sleep at night? And my name is Rihanna Bacan, B-A-C-H-A-N, resident since 1987. My 4-year-old daughter is breathing the same poison that I did at her age. I'm done. All of you are failing us.
Tom Layden is the next person to speak, and he'll be followed by Jason Seaman. I'm sorry, Jason Simon, excuse me.
No, I'm sorry. I want an answer. How do you sleep at night?
Ma'am, you're outside of the bounds of the permit. But I sleep well at night, not necessarily this. I didn't sleep well last night knowing what the situation here is, if that makes any difference to you.
What town do you live in?
I don't live here.
What town do you live in?
I live in Springfield, ma'am.
Let's find out where the nearest facility is closest to Springfield, and if you're downwind, because maybe then you won't sleep 365 days out of the year like the rest of us.
Thank you. Is Tom Layden here? He's already gone. He's filled out 2 cards. Jason Simon. Jason Simon is not here. Britton Cummings. Brittany Cummings. She's also not here. Yvonne Mayer. Yvonne Mayer. Rhonda Cooey. Rhonda? She's not here. This is through this. Why I can't. It looks like Marianne Skorenkowski, S-R-E-N-I-A, looks like W-S-K-I. No. Steve Leopoldo.
Steve Leopoldo, S-T-E-V-E, last name L-E-O-P-O-L-D-O. I'd like to know where John Kim is.
Directors don't attend permit meetings. The permit staff that work on the permit are the ones that attend permit meetings.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this is. That's what was requested that the agency hold, and that's what this meeting is. It's a permit to accept comments on the draft construction permit.
I'll submit formal comments, but I had a question regarding seals. Is there such a thing as a 50% seal within a total permanent enclosure?
I'm trying to understand your question.
Can you have a 50% seal within a total permanent enclosure, such as when a semi backs up into a loading dock?
So are you asking that when the semi backs up to the loading dock?
Can that be a permanent seal? Is there such a thing as a 50% seal within a total permanent enclosure? Is it a yes or a no? Is there such a thing as not a total seal?
Well, I'm having a difficult time understanding the actual question as you're phrasing it.
Okay, a semi backs up.
Correct.
To a building.
Correct.
Is that a complete seal, or is that a partial seal?
It can be designed to have a seal, and there would be natural draft openings where there is no seal.
So you're telling me a semi can create a complete seal against a dock?
They can be designed with a seal in place, but there would be gaps that would be considered to be a natural draft opening, which would be then calculated as part of the permanent total enclosure calculation.
Thank you.
Looks like Kovas McCann? No. Yes.
My name is Kovas McCann, Kovas MCCANN. Please look at some solutions that do not include kids getting cancer.
Thank you. Yeah, I had another one for Luke Stiflinger. And, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, and that name's familiar because I think we called that already. We got Alexandra McCann. Should be followed by Ellen Bayer.
Hello, my name is Alexandra McCann. I am 9 years old and I represent children. I do not want to breathe ETO. Please protect me and other children. ALEKSANDRA MCCANN.
Thank you. Ellen will be followed by, it looks like, David, and the last name is Zupanis. Okay.
My name is Ellen Baer, E-L-L-E-N, Baer, B-A-E-R. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Village of Western Springs. President Gallagher and the Village Board of Trustees want to send their strong support to our neighboring communities, and we appreciate the statements that have been made earlier tonight. We will submit our comments with regard to the permit and its requirements in writing, and we will yield the rest of our time to the other residents who are here to speak tonight.
Thank you. And he will be followed by Ray Sescale.
Okay. And good evening. I'm David Zupancic, D-A-V-I-D. Last name is Z-U-P-A-N-C-I-C. I'm a retired administrative law judge from the Illinois Department of Employment Security. I was
Can you
also
move the
retired-
mic a little bit just so
Yes,
that it...
I'm a retired lawyer, a retired administrative law judge from the Illinois Department of Employment Security, and former real estate broker. My wife and I live in Darien at 1109 Tamarack Drive. There are 3 houses for sale that have been for sale for quite a few months. No action, no sold signs. I turn down side streets. I see 3 or 4 other signs. No action, no sold signs. No one is exactly selling houses in Darien to move to Willowbrook. That's the gist of what I want to point out on comments. I believe real estate values have plummeted because of the actions of our Willowbrook Sterigenics location. Sterigenics just has no credibility in my mind. They blame pollution in the air on Interstate 55. They go for sealed verdicts and sealed court orders. They have done nothing to increase their credibility since 1980. And you've heard the other speakers. I agree very much with what our elected officials and our representatives have said. I feel sorry for the employees, the government employees of Willowbrook. Their office is a block away from Sterigenics. I mean, you know, we can say about shortcomings of various officials, but I thank you for, in the EPA, Illinois EPA, for your services here tonight and the services of the young ladies working for your organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And on deck will be, it looks like, Jan Liu.
I'm Ray Cheska, CESCA from Oak Brook, Illinois, and I do represent an organization called the Human Race. 1 year ago, this past July, the EPA stated that it is returning to its core mission of protecting human health and the environment. In a press release, EPA also stated that it is committed to providing clean air and safe air, water, and land for all Americans. Now, I'm asking that you get on with your mission and not sign a construction permit to allow Sterigenics from opening again in Oak Brook if they even consider using ethylene oxide as a sterilization agent. Now, you heard Mayor Grasso talk about alternatives, and you said, oh, no, this is the best one. Well, over the past decade, many hospitals have successfully moved away from the use of ethylene oxide due to its toxicity, cost, and inefficiency. Early implementers include Mary Hitchcock Memorial Hospital in Lebanon, New Hampshire, documented its efforts in 2002. This hospital implemented use of both peracetic acid and hydrogen peroxide plasma devices and was able to significantly reduce, if not eliminate, its reliance on ethylene oxide. In 2008, the Kaiser Health System, the country's largest nonprofit health plan and delivery system, documented its effort to reduce their ethylene oxide burden. By 2014, St. Joseph Hospital and Medical Center in Phoenix demonstrated even further success in reducing of ethylene oxide sterilization usage. St. Joseph was able to eliminate 100% of its use on ethylene oxide by substituting it with a hydrogen peroxide sterilization system. After implementation, they were able to increase the output of sterile devices by 250%. In many Chicago area hospital systems, there have been or has been a large shift away from ethylene oxide consistent with the above-mentioned efforts. Advocate Good Samaritan, right here, Downers Grove, and in the entire Advocate system shifted away from ethylene oxide approximately a decade ago. St. Anthony Hospital in downtown Chicago eliminated the use of it in 2014, and Swedish Covenant Hospital terminated its use in 2015. Additionally, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease is working now with the villages of Willowbrook, along with the DuPage County Health Department, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, including yourself, to determine whether ethylene oxide release into the air from the Sterigenics International Facility may further cause health problems in people who live in the Willowbrook community. So we need to let them play out their ongoing research before allowing any license to be awarded. My gosh, how can we turn a blind eye on research? So in summary, the job is not done yet. The EPA stated mission to provide clean and safe air for all Americans, not modified air or a little toxic air, but clean air.
Thank you.
And there is also much needed research to be done by the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease. And finally, a detailed review of all the proven safe alternative systems that are available. So based on that, please do not approve a construction permit until all the work is done.
I just want to mention, because several people, first, it is, there are improvements always ongoing where there are new sterilization processes that come along, and FDA is looking into that, and that's all very good. And as has been mentioned several times, for certain things there are alternatives. The company would not be able to provide a certification if there is an alternative.
Is Young Leo here? No, okay.
Under the new law, the facility is required to provide a certification for, if it wants to, a certification that ethylene oxide is. Evan, can you put the language up?
Have they done that?
No, they cannot. Yes, that's my point. If there are alternatives, they will not be able to provide a certification as required by the law. They do it on the products. They're not going to sterilize anything right now. They provide the certification before they can sterilize. That certification is not part of the permit. It is part of the law, and they have to comply with it. That's my point, is they have to comply with it. It's not part of the permit, it's part of the law, and they will have to comply with it.
Okay, we're speaking from out here, and it's not going to be on the record because court reporter doesn't have it. The responses will be, but you're going to get a response without the question, is how that works. So it's not a good way to do this. However, I do want to state there's a lot of people that have comments and questions. And I mean, we've still got 19 people to go in 20 minutes. We're not going to get through everybody tonight. I do remind you that we do have a comment period open, and you can also ask questions in that comment period. I encourage everyone that has questions tonight to do that. We do have to respond to those in writing, and that will also include it will include everything that was also done during this hearing. Okay. The question, as I heard it, was this: can we get something before the comment period ends? And I don't know what you're asking when you say something. I mean, okay, wait a minute. Okay, we're getting out of hand again because it's going to be tough.
Can we get an ETA on answers for the questions asked tonight?
All questions and comments we will respond to in the response to comments. I mean, to the extent. That's issued concurrent with our decision.
So
No,
none of the
the
questions
issue
asked tonight
gets to be,
will be
you
answered
start
until the-
shooting at a moving target is part of the problem. The other thing is that it also causes some other issues as far as comments on comments and several other issues. Is Slovak, boy, I'm horrible at no's. Yeah, she's not here? Okay. She is here? Okay, if she's here, she could come to the microphone.
We have a whole stack of people here who have not. Yeah. Okay, so someone else can go. Okay.
Okay. I just didn't hear you. Bob, oh my. Wallab? Is it? Bob Wallab?
Take Slavka's time, if possible.
We can't do that. We've got a bunch of other people that are ahead of her. Right, but the issue is that we're trying to hear from as many people as they have. If they're not here, it's kind of like you have to be present to win.
You can count me as Slavka.
Right, but the point is, you can come again. You can come again at the end if we have time.
Or I can have her read my questions for her time.
What'd you say? Go ahead. 2 minutes.
I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but since we're talking about alternatives.
Spell it for the court reporter.
Excuse me. Catherine Camarena, Katharine, Camarena, Camarena. I had emailed several times and never got a response back from Illinois EPA regarding the criteria that would certify a product to be appropriate for ethylene oxide only, and I had some concerns about that. So I'll read my questions that I had emailed that I didn't get a response to, and perhaps I can get a response in this avenue here. I would like to know, and we can answer these in writing as well, who will be drafting the criteria to certify that a product is only ethylene oxide appropriate? My second question is, what criteria must be met to certify a product is ethylene oxide only? My third question is, will these criteria be modified as new sterilization methods are approved for use, such as in the efforts of the FDA Innovation Challenge? My fourth question is, I had a lot, and maybe that's why you guys didn't write me back. Even though a supplier device has been FDA approved with ethylene oxide sterilization, but would be appropriate for alternatives, will implementing these safer alternatives be a requirement? A sub-question to that is, will manufacturers and suppliers be required to submit a PMA supplement for sterilization method change if an alternative is found to be an appropriate substitute? I have 2 more questions, and then I'm done. For permeability issues, supply kits and packs, for example, will changing their outer packaging be taken into consideration? And my last question is, who is participating in the process of drafting these certifications? Thank you.
So,
Thank you. You did that very well.
do you want me to respond to those now, or do you want them in writing? Because you've got. Okay, I'll try to provide a real short answer, and then we'll expand on that. In general, what you're describing is that the language of the law is that the supplier has to provide the certification. That if you grab my presentation from the table over there, it has the language of the law. The supplier has to provide the certification. And then you also had talked about alternatives. Well, if there's an alternative, that's what I was talking about just now. If there's an alternative, they will not be able to provide the certification. So if there's something new that comes on the market, they won't be able to provide the certification if it treats a certain device.
Okay, Michael Plaskovica. Michael, no, we've, Amir Vafa.
How's it going? Last name is Vafa, V-A-F-A, first name Amir. First, regarding the certification, I was under the assumption that that's only if they're under a seal order. And if they negotiate away to seal order, does that mean that they don't need the certifications anymore?
So they're currently under a seal order, and I'm not here tonight. I'm here tonight to talk about the permit. I can't really talk about the consent order.
Okay, the other thing is there's dispersion modeling that needs to be done. Can the EPA say, you know, this is too harmful, your dispersion modeling is no good, we're not going to give you the permit? Is that a possibility or no? Like, let's say the dispersion model pumped out 20,000 pounds into the air or something. It was something that was not acceptable. Then could the EPA then deny them the permit and say you can't operate?
The answer is yes. If we can issue a seal order, we cannot issue a permit if there are unhealthful impacts above certain levels from a facility.
Okay, so the current dispersion model was with an 87-foot stack, correct? That was the best way of dispersing everything. Since they don't have a permit for that, can't the logic be you don't have a permit for an 87-foot stack, your dispersion model is really not that good, so permit denied? Like would that train of logic work?
What Chris was just describing were things outside of a permitting transaction.
So you could potentially do the permit and then tell them, yeah, your dispersion model isn't good, you don't have this permit for this. You know, it just, to me, so let me just put it a different way. If I wanted to open up a factory in my garage and I needed an 87-foot stack, I would think that if I didn't have the permit for that, the EPA would say, yeah, you can't really do that because you're not really dispersing the stuff well enough. So I was just wondering if that train of logic would work in terms of denying the permit.
That train of logic would only work if Sterigenics was not prepared to submit dispersion modeling at the height of stack that they could get approved by the Village of Willowbrook. Or if they did conduct such modeling and at the height of stack provided by the Village of Willowbrook, there would still be excessive impacts.
Okay. And then the last thing, and this is something you could submit in writing, is how do you measure the 85 pounds since there's some uncertainty about this continual monitoring and whether it's actually going to work? Do you just take how much is coming out of the stack at 2 parts per million or whatever it is and multiply it by a year and say it's 85 pounds or 100 pounds? Or, I mean, it just seems like it's difficult if you don't have the exact science of what's coming out.
So the monitoring system will not only have the system to measure ethylene oxide as a concentration, but it also will have a flow monitor. So once you have flow, you know the area of the stack, you're going to have a volume. Once you have a volume, you will know how many feet per minute is coming out
so
that stack.
You can mathematically.
So mathematically, you'll be able to know exactly what's coming out of that stack based upon that monitoring system.
Okay, and then one last thing, I'm really sorry I'm going over, is that it says that they need a dispersion model, but there's really no model of, I mean, there's no real law or anything that says what's acceptable and what's not. It just says 2 parts per million or 99.9% reduction or something like that. Where is the criteria of like what would be acceptable and what wouldn't, in case the 40-foot stack or whatever they have now is not good enough?
So US EPA, looks at the risk levels, and they're when they look at a rule and regulation, they're looking at 1 in 10,000 risk. Through our permitting transaction and the limits imposed out the stack on an annual basis, we're far, far below that.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Robert Thomas, and he'll be followed by Mary Bradley. Is Robert here? Robert is not here. Mary Bradley. Mary Bradley is not here. There's another one from Robert Thomas. Rebecca Palsack. And she'll be followed by Amber McFarlane, it looks like.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Palisoc. I am a 31-year
Can you speak
resident.
into the mic a little bit so she's...
I am a 31-year resident of Darien, and in those 31 years, I have unfortunately had to witness my mother be diagnosed with breast cancer twice. And she did the BRCA test, and she doesn't have any of the traits for it, which leads us to believe that it is environmental. My question is going back to something that you had said earlier about the word safe. Unfortunately, I had to walk out of the room because I'm here with my newborn son. I was wondering if you could repeat what you said about the word safe.
So what I said is, as an agency, both from at the state level, and I can speak for the US EPA, is we don't use that terminology. We talk about risk. So people have said the word safe. That's not a terminology that we use as a regulatory agency. We use risk assessment.
I think given their storied history of toxic spills in Lyle and outrageous numbers being spilled in Willowbrook and into Darien, I think it's absurd, the height of absurdity, that we're even here discussing a permit for them to reopen while not being able to use the word safe. Until...
Can I just mention something? So it's not that there aren't levels, as Kevin had mentioned. There's US EPA has their 1 in 10,000. And at this, we're getting them down close to the 1 in a million. So those are terms, those are assessments that we look at to kind of try to look at that. But it's just not a terminology we use.
I think that until it is, I don't think that there needs to be any discussion about a permit for them to reopen. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Amber McFarlane, is she here? Okay, and she'll be followed by, oh my, it looks like, I'm going to try and say it's Ann Swank or Swank.
I don't know.
Okay.
So I'm
Go-
Annabelle.
Go ahead, Amber.
I'm Annabelle McFarlane, ANABELMCFARLIN. So I have a question. So as I sit here and I listen to everyone else, of course, I have new questions. One question before I proceed to my questions is, where is CMS located? On the stack? And please make it quick. Thank you.
So the continuous emission monitoring will be located on the stack prior to it exiting.
Thank you. So my question then is, your modeling is based on what comes out of the stack. But every time something pulls up, something gets unloaded and reloaded, there is dispersion. There is the chemical. How do you monitor that?
That's contained within the permanent total enclosure, and all the emissions are contained within the building, and then
Pardon me.
goes to the control
Right.
system.
So the question that Mr. Leopoldo asked you earlier is that a full seal is not possible. So clearly that's not possible. Can we agree on that?
So there's a natural draft opening.
Right.
So within the method 204, you're allowed to have an opening, provided that it meets the criteria.
I understand, but that releases ETO into the atmosphere and no one's monitoring it.
No,
And
it's
that's
under
an-
negative pressure, so it's not entering the atmosphere.
So I don't want to keep going on this line only because I have a couple other questions. But
Okay.
as we agree, ETO has off-gassing, and that happens for days. So when it moves, ETO moves with it. And that's something you can't control and no one is measuring. And that's an issue. I mean, it's just an issue. You're asking to approve a permit for a company that cannot control its emissions. That's the point. So the permit in and of itself is moot. There's no point to your permit. But moving on. You also say in the permit that they're allowed to run 24/7. That's, or at least in the drafts I've read. My question, because I'm in research, marketing research, but still research, and when I do research and I do modeling and I think about what something means, and I do inferences, it matters. The source information that I'm assessing matters. So my question to you is this. There are no chronic studies. There's only acute exposure. It's 8 hours, I believe. So how do you model without data? How? Somebody please explain this, because I have not found a study that talks about chronic exposure in humans. And you're asking to run it chronically, 24/7.
So a permit contains limits.
Right.
And then you do your dispersion modeling based on those limits in the permit.
Right, and your concern is with risk, human risk. How are you assessing that? Are you even qualified to do that?
Well, I didn't do that assessment. We have modelers at the agency whose job is to do modeling.
I understand, but again, not to belabor this point, you're talking about human risk, right? You're talking about human risk. So when I've done research, I look at base data and I make decisions based on base data. My question to you is, you don't have any. So how are you modeling 24/7 emissions in a community where there is no study? And if you have a study that says it knows the outcome of chronic exposure, I'd like you to cite it.
I think you're asking, we're having failure to communicate your question. I don't think it's going to benefit us if we try to elucidate it, other than to simply say, we rely on information from US EPA for the concentrations that have a chronic risk. Using that information for the concentrations that have a chronic risk, what the level of risk is, we could then use dispersion modeling to see what the concentration would be as a result of the Sterigenics facility if it resumed operation with the new controls.
Sir, not to go on this line of questioning, but where are you getting the data for the chronic risk?
As we explained in the slide, we're getting it from US EPA and their integrated risk information system.
I understand, but where's it being measured? So I understand what you're saying to me, and I understand what we're talking about, and I understand that there are scientists, but as you know, across the world, there are other scientists who believe humans should not be exposed. EPA, for a number of years, called it a probable carcinogen. In 2006, 2 panels said that it was a known carcinogen, but they didn't move on that. They waited until 2016 to do something to say that it's a known carcinogen. Then they went ahead and came up with new numbers, and now you're telling me that I have to rely on the modeling, which, by the way, I live and work here, so I'm here 24/7 too. And you're telling me that somehow the modeling was wrong, the thresholds were wrong. Now you have new thresholds, you're confident in those, but yet I'm not sure what makes you so sure.
I think you're confusing dispersion modeling with the risk values.
I know I'm out of time. I know I'm out of time, but I want to make sure we're clear. Dispersion modeling talks about how much is dispersed, how much of the product is dispersed in the environment. And what we're trying to do is approve a permit, right? Your role is to ensure that it's the least amount of risk to human health and the environment. And I'm merely suggesting that your dispersion model is flawed because you have no way of knowing the answer. That's my point. And I apologize for taking so much time. Thank you.
Thank you. Was Ann here? I'm not even going to try and say the last name. Swank? Okay, she's not. We have looks like M. Headington. Okay. Should be followed by Vince Headington. I do point also that we are at 9 o'clock, so we are going to have to move along. We've got about 8 people, and I really would like to give everybody an opportunity to speak, but we do have a set time to be out of the building. So go ahead.
I have an offer for you to get you out faster, because I'm a former director on the board of the Illinois Environmental Council, where I served for 6 years. And I know something about toxics, and I had planned on going through something I'd prepared for most of today, and I'm willing to give that up if you will allow somebody who knows more than I do on this a question, because I need her help, and that's Catherine Howard. She has one question, and you don't have to put up with me. I want her question answered, because she is a hero here. If you watch CBS News, Dave Savini, she is a hero. She is quoted over and over. I think we owe her that respect, and I want Catherine to be able to ask her question.
If it's one question, I'll allow it. If you state your name and spell your last name for the record. Thank you. And if you have something that you wanted to read and want to turn it in, we'd also accept that so that it's in the record, or you can submit it in writing during the comment period. Okay, great. Go ahead, ma'am.
Catherine Howard, Katherne, Howard, Howard. My question goes back to the permit, and in most of the items where you're monitoring, you're looking at averages. Now, we all know that averages, you're going to get some low numbers, and you're going to get some really high numbers. And then you're going to take an 8-hour average or a 3-hour average. My question is, when those high numbers are there, how much is going out? If you're relying on averages, then that means there are times when those numbers going out could be extremely high, followed by times when they're very low. Your water levels, your liquid levels in the scrubbers, high, low. When they're low, ETO is escaping. So I'm not sure I understand where you're saying you're continuous monitoring and everything else, because that's always based on averaging. And we can look at those numbers and we can see that they're not consistent. They range. So that's my question, is asking you guys, do you have something better than averages?
Bless you. We average because that's going to give us better data.
No, it's not. It's going to give you easy data. It's not going to give you better data. It's going to give you easy data. It's going to give you data that the company can use and manipulate.
So when you're saying high and low in the extremes, they are so low, you can't have a really high number and then average it low because the values are so low that they have to maintain.
But you're still not going to get realistic emissions going out. You're going to get averages. You're going to base everything off of averages.
Thank you. Was Vince Headington here? And he'll be followed by Sue Camelot.
My name is Vince Headington. I'm a healthcare attorney. I live in
Vince, can you spell your last name for the record, please?
Headington.
Thank you.
I live in Burr Ridge and have for the last 27 years. I'm also a member of the Healthcare Section Council of the Illinois State Bar Association. And I don't pretend to be a scientist, but I do know in listening to what's going on here today that we have recent legislation in June of this year. So what we're getting is less poison, but poison nonetheless. And it's like telling the people of Flint, Michigan, well, we're giving you water, but there's just a little bit of lead in the water. And that's what we're here today hearing. The plan for an enormous stack is not innovative. It is old school. It's otherwise known as not in my backyard. And so while there may be less emissions that affect Willowbrook and Burr Ridge where I live, there's somebody else that is going to have this poison in their air. And there's plenty of blame to go around on this. The Illinois EPA has known for years about cancer risks in Willowbrook, first from a probable carcinogen, now to a definite carcinogen. We have the testimony of, in this afternoon, of more than one physician about the dangers of this. We have the Illinois State Medical Society that has come out and said that ETO is dangerous, and this makes a lot of sense, that because for a physician, the rule is first do no harm. What we have here is a permit to do harm. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sue will be followed by Denise, it looks like, Hepner.
Can you go through the other people? I want to make sure everybody has time.
Okay. Is Denise Hepner here? Should be followed by Charlotte Kruger. Go ahead.
I don't like speaking in front of a lot of people here. My name's Denise Hepner, EPNER, and DENISE is the first name. First, I want to thank you all in the forefront of this fight. I am so thankful that you are here. I'm so thankful that you are here fighting for this community. And I'm really appreciative of that, number one. And I thank you for being here answering our questions as well. I hope that you really listen to our hearts and to our concerns, because we have a lot of them. And we have a lot of evidence showing the devastating effects of what ETO has done to our families. Me personally, I had a brain tumor as well. It was the size of a baseball, so it's about this big. In my head, I had seizures. I still have devastating effects from it. There's a lot of things that I still cannot do. And I fear that when this is allowed again, that I'll get another one. I don't want to do that again. It was awful. I'm still dealing with that from 2010. So I don't understand some things, and part of that is from the surgery that I've had. But I'm trying to understand, is there only one time a year that you guys are going to be monitoring what they've done? You're only going to check in on them once a year?
So they have the permit requires a continuous emission monitor. So as Kevin has said, that has a data log on it. The law requires us to inspect them once a year, yes. So an inspection by our staff once a year where we go through the facility and we check. Now there's also record keeping and reporting requirements that are more frequent.
If their history has been lying, though, how can you trust that? Like, how can you trust that? If you're giving them this permit, you're making yourself liable for allowing them to do this when you know that they're not honest people. So I'm curious to know how you're going to really monitor that.
an inspector, when they go through the logs, and the reports that they submit, you can tell. Right? Do you want to
So when our inspectors go out, they go through the conditions of the permit to make sure that they're complying with those conditions of the permit. So they'll make sure that the records are being kept, and they'll evaluate those records and compare those to the information that they're required to have. That's mandatory once a year, but as Brad said, and I've said earlier, that we have continuous emissions monitoring that is continuously monitoring emissions out that stack.
Is there something that, I'm just curious to know, because it does
Can you speak into the
it does make me question, like, I don't trust Sterigenics, but I'm having a hard time even trusting people that are monitoring them, because it doesn't seem like you're on, I feel like I don't have anybody to depend on, except for the community that's fighting for all of us. And I want to know, what are you going to do to earn our trust? Because right now, we don't really have that. And I think a good step in that direction would be to decline this permit, would be at least a step to say, okay, we can listen to you. Because, I mean, we're scared. I know a lot of people who have cancer. I know a lot of people that have had tumors. And I've had it. I experienced it. I still suffer from it. I don't want to do that again. I'm terrified to do that again. It terrifies me. And I want you to, when you think about this, please picture yourself in this community. Think of your families in this community. Would you approve it if you were living here? Would you approve it if your families were here? Please just think that through very carefully, because we are very concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And as Charlotte's coming, she'll be followed by Kathleen O'Hare, excuse me, go ahead.
Thank you for working overtime. My name is Charlotte Kruger, K-R-U-E-G-E-R. I built my home in '79. In '08, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. In '15, I came back with stage 4 cancer of rectal, liver, and kidney. I've been on chemotherapy for 7 hours every other Monday for the rest of my life. I think it's because of where I live. I've been a real estate agent for 36 years, and I have seen that our values of our houses are going to go down because questions are asked for Hinsdale, Darien, Willowbrook, Burr Ridge. This is also part of the problem of Sterigenics, is the value of what we're losing on what we live in. I have been vice president of my association where I live in Timberlake since 1990. There are lots of us in Timberlake. We have about 1,500 people. There's a lot of us that have cancer because of where we live. Are you guys voting tonight if you're going to give them the permit? Can we go home and say, hooray, we won? We're not going to have this problem any longer? Are you going to vote tonight?
First of all, there is not a decision made tonight. We have a comment period that remains open until August 15. Then we will review those comments and we will make a final decision. We have 90 days from the date of the application to make a final decision, but our decision is not a vote. Our decision is based on whether the application meets the applicable laws and regulations.
Can we come back the 15th to get the decision?
Well, if you filled out a card tonight, we will be notifying everyone of our final decision, and we will be sending out our response to comments to everyone that fills out a card. So if you have not filled out a card tonight and you want to be informed directly by the agency of its decision and receive its response to comments, you should fill out a card before you leave tonight.
Thank you.
I want to also add that if you've also submit comments by email or comments in writing, you will also be put on the notification list. Some of the cards are a little bit difficult to read, but we'll do our best at deciphering those to get information out. Is Kathleen O'Hare here? And she'll be followed by Rick Morton.
Thank you. I really didn't want to speak tonight, but after seeing Mrs. Haller and the number of very sick people go before me, I decided I can suck it up. The incredible speakers tonight, the community has spoken, these brilliant minds, amazing researchers. This is advocacy at its finest. I'm hearing that there'll be a decision made at some point, and it sounds like you've described two options. One is to either accept it, the other is to deny it. But I would like to add that we know what a third one is. It's that you can modify it by sending emails to Mr. Wagner or emails to Mrs. Hoffman and negotiating even these terms about the construction permit. We are watching you. We know what's been going on. We would like to ask that you don't choose the modification behind closed doors. Many people tonight have echoed the lack of trust. I am one of them. As the night's gone on, it's gotten increasingly cold in here, and I can't tell if it's the cold emanating from this panel or from the tumor on my pancreas. The shirt that I'm wearing, I wear only at negative occasions, with the exception that one of the best nights of my life was February 15th, when we celebrated the seal order. I don't want to wear this shirt anymore. As people say, I'd give you the shirt off my back. I would like someone on the panel to remember what the take-home message is tonight. We don't want to wear our shirts anymore.
Is Rick Morton here? Okay, very good. And he'll be followed by Paul Farber.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Morton, M-O-R-T-O-N. Looking at you tonight, I'm not inspired with confidence. And here's why. 39 years ago, July 6, 1984, in a letter that IEPA wrote to Griffith Labs, and they said the toxicity data provides evidence of human cancers of the pancreas, the bladder, brain, central nervous system, and stomach associated with ETO exposure. 35 years ago. Various animal studies have shown carcinogenic, mutagenic, leukogenic, and tetragenic effects. These studies indicate that the acceptable ground level concentrations of ETO are 0.007 micrograms per cubic meter. Nothing happened. On July 31st, in a letter to Mr. Cy Levine at IEPA from a concerned citizen, this was in 1989, since you were not aware of the hazards of ethylene oxide, I would strongly suggest that you consult with your expert in Springfield and become familiar with this deadly chemical. Poisoning of persons working and living in within proximity of Griffith and like facilities throughout Illinois must be stopped. That was 30 years ago, yet nothing happened. This past April, a PhD chemist with 45 years experience in chromatography and mass spectrometry of chemical analysis prepared a summary critiquing the back vent tests that you were supposed to oversee. He concluded there may be reasons to question whether 99% efficiency was demonstrated. The report included an email from EPA's Ned Shapley to Sterigenics about his concerns, and he wrote, "These are not recommendations. They are requirements, and failure to follow these procedures could be grounds for regulatory authority to invalidate the test. This is your mandate to oversee and operate these tests accurately, yet nothing has happened." Director Kim couldn't be bothered to come here tonight, But on May 7th of 2019, he spoke to the Chemical Industry Council of Illinois. I can't tell you how disappointing I find that. So, while the past history for IEPA, in my opinion, is tattered, I hope that you can find a way to shed it and look at the permit, look at the regulations with a different eye and find reasons to deny it. And I'd like to know what steps that IEPA will take to correct these behaviors. And that's my question. Yes, there are none. Thank you.
I'm Paul Farber. That's Paulfarber. I'm a resident of Willowbrook. I actually live about 1,000 feet from the Sterigenics plant. Besides that, I'm a professional engineer in the state of Illinois with over 40 years of experience in air pollution control technology, continuous emissions monitoring, and source testing. For many years, I worked for Sargent & Lundy and was responsible for the performance testing of most of Dynegy's and Ameren's coal-fired power plants' FGD systems. Earlier in the meeting, Representative Busacki, and if I mispronounced your name, I apologize, talked about some of the emissions readings that Sterigenics had put forward. What the good representative didn't mention and perhaps did not know was that that emissions data, which Sterigenics has so widely praised, was based on testing one sterilization chamber out of 14. They did not test at full capacity. If I had tested a power plant at 7% capacity, you would have me wearing an orange jumpsuit right now. If Sterigenics even proposes to test at anything less than 90%, you should reject that, because that's not right, it's not professional, and it should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, you had passed earlier.
Yeah.
Is she still here? Did you want to say anything? We're through the cards.
Actually, the questions I have need to be answered by my friend Ursula, if that's okay.
Okay.
I do have a litany of questions, but I'll try to hit just the highlights.
Sue, can you state your name again, just so we've got it for the record? And then speak into the mic so that your back is toward them so they can hear the question as well.
Urzula, last name Tanouyue. There's a requirement in section 6-1, provision A, point 2, that requires the direction of the airflow through all the openings to be into the enclosure at all times. I don't see a provision in the permit that describes how the facility will demonstrate compliance with this.
That's fine. I'm going to have Kevin respond, but let's recognize if you have a litany of questions, we're already over the time that we're supposed to be here. So if you want to read them into if you have a litany, we're not going to be able to answer them all, but we'll let you read them into the record and we'll respond to them in the responsiveness summary.
Thanks, that's fine. If you have a quick answer, sure, but otherwise I can keep reading.
So that inward flow is monitored by that differential pressure showing negative pressure inside the building through outside the building, meaning that negative 007 inches water column requirement of method 204.
It's interesting that you bring up that pressure and the facial velocity that it is supposed to be equivalent to. 200 feet per minute is the floor that method 204 requires. It needs to be at least that speed.
For comparison, this translates to 2.3 miles per hour. A typical walking pace is considered to be 3.1 miles per hour. So the 200 feet per minute is slower than an average person walks. So what happens then when a person walks out the door and takes a trail of swirling air behind them, or a truck leaves the loading dock and swirling air follows that truck in the vacuum that's created through that movement? Shouldn't there be a study done at this facility to determine if that 200 feet per minute is sufficient, or if it should be increased in areas like the loading dock, for example? Another issue I have with that is that there's no monitor in that hallway. The list of monitors for the pressure drop includes 3 in the sterilization aisle, one of which appears to be optional. For example, if the sterilizers are not used in the east of the building, that monitor, according to the permit, can be turned off. Well, that monitor is kind of important because there's a door that opens on that wall and several windows. So we would like to know if the pressure changes in that area when that door is opened and nobody knows about it because there's nothing there. Another thing that would be useful is if any doors that are not listed as natural draft openings had an alarm for them that was hooked up to the fire department, because I think they would like to know if it was such an emergency that those doors would be opened, compromising the PT. There are more monitors, one inside the aeration room, one inside the vacuum pump room, another in the scrubber and the dry bed room, and another in the sterilized storage room. There's no monitor in that hallway by the loading docks. You wouldn't know if that pressure changed there. So that's why I'm suggesting that an additional measure be added to make sure that air is always flowing into the enclosure in that area. And that can be as simple as a ribbon with a security camera on it, so you can visually see if that air is flowing inside or not. There's another site. I referenced earlier a permit that Illinois gave for a printing press in which pressure difference recordings were made every 1 minute. In this permit, it's every 5 minutes. Why is this one less stringent than a printing press? I want to reiterate also Catherine Howard's concern about the 3-hour rolling average for the same reasons. It can mask spikes and troughs. If you're familiar with statistical software, it's very easy to just spit out a max, a min, and a standard deviation to add some teeth, some force, some validity to those averages. What's another one? There are 3 dock bays on each side of the building. 3 for receiving, 3 for shipping. What mechanism is going to be proposed that's I didn't see in the permit to ensure that only one of those, or at maximum 2, which is accounted for by the NDO calculation, only one of them would be opened at one time? Is there a provision for alarms that would ring that would prevent more than one of those to be opened at the same time? I think I'm going to let everybody go at this point because the rest of these can be submitted in writing, and that just gives you kind of a flavor of the little things that could be improved with the permit.
What also would probably be helpful is if you would submit those questions in writing as well, just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding on our part of what was said, or that it went through and wasn't accurately or completely transcribed correctly. We want to make sure that we address the issue correctly. Thank you. Wow. Thank everyone for being here. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. I know that a lot of the issues that have been raised tonight have been heart-wrenching and very, very difficult. I thank you for speaking out tonight. I know that in a lot of cases it's taken bravery to come forth and speak, and I thank you. I remind everyone that the comment period is open through August 15th. And the information for providing those comments is on both the notice and on the information that was provided tonight. Thank you again. This meeting is adjourned.